Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the What If guy, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Issei Became the Magical Criminal. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Issei Hayadu had once been a hero and a pillar among the supernatural factions. He had been the Red Dragon Emperor and the pawn of his fiancée, Rias Gremry. Now he sat in a high-security prison in Guantanamo, United States, awaiting trial for crimes he was accused of. He wanted the death penalty, believing it would bring him peace and freedom from a life he described as unbearable. He had learned that the prison offered several methods of execution and, after considering them, he preferred lethal injection because it was supposed to be the quickest and least painful. That, he decided, would be his last wish. While he waited for judgment, Issei recalled how he had fallen from being a hero to a defendant behind bars. 1 year had passed since the peace treaty among all the world's factions. Thanks to a joint effort, most terrorist groups and resistances had been dismantled. The long-sought peace had arrived. The major threats were eliminated, leaving only a few renegade demons, fallen angels, and isolated individuals who still caused trouble. For a time, Issei's life had been joyful, and he had achieved his dream of leading many close companions. Initially he had been immature, focused on selfish desires. Over time, however, he had come to know his partners better and to love them deeply. He had been held back at first by trauma linked to his first relationship with Yuma, who had been the fallen angel Ryanair, but with the understanding and support of Kaneko, Asia, and Aquino, he had gradually overcome that fear and learned to build genuine bonds. He became engaged to several women: Rias Gremry, Asia Argento, Aquino Himejima, Kaneko Tuju, Ravel Phoenix, Zenobia Corda, Irina Shidu, Rosweiss, Lefay Pendragon, and Kuroka. Everything seemed to be going well. He rose in rank within the demonic world. He told his parents the truth about his life. At first they did not believe him, but when the women revealed their wings, his parents accepted it. They celebrated and encouraged him to think about starting a family. When the school year ended, Rias and Aquino graduated and entered university. Issei made an effort for their sake and advanced to his third year, earning high marks across his subjects. During the holiday celebrations at the Gremry mansion, the women had prepared a private surprise for him behind a sealed door and a sound barrier. They were dressed festively, and they celebrated together in private that night. Over the vacations their bonds deepened and they grew closer as companions. Eventually the new school year began, and for Issei's misfortune several of the women were placed in different courses. He found himself left mostly alone at school, staying with a small group of friends: Aika Kiryu, Murayama, Kates, Saji, and Momo. Matsuda and Motohama had transferred away from Kuo. When they left, Issei divided his belongings among them as a farewell gift. Time passed and most of the women were no longer by his side as often. Only Asia and Ravel remained close at times, but that was not enough. Drake encouraged him when he felt down. Friends were busy. Kiba was in a relationship with Tsubaki, Gasper spent time with Valerie, Saji was focused on his partners Momo and Ruruko, and Vale was away on missions. Issei found himself alone again. Zenobia had become student council president, Asia led the occult research club, Rosweiss taught at the academy, and Rias and Aquino attended university. The others were on missions or occupied with duties. Issei mustered the courage to speak with them about how he felt, but it proved to be a mistake. During his PhD of solitude he read extensively on magic, dragons, and chemistry. He created new weapons and techniques and developed a transformation intended to rival great power, though it would later prove irrelevant to what happened next. One Saturday afternoon he went to a jewelry shop to pick up an item he had ordered as a surprise. He intended to find the women around the city and take them to a restaurant in Paris. Nervous and rehearsing what he would say, he searched the town until he finally found them. When he arrived at the park where everything had begun, he found the women he loved with some other young men. At first glance they all looked very handsome, and seeing them together made Issei's heart hurt. He had sprayed deodorant to mask his scent and hidden in some bushes to listen. Rias admitted to Louis that she liked him a lot, and Louis returned the sentiment. They shared a tender moment while Issei, hidden nearby, could only cry. Aquino teased Rias about being forward and then moved toward Zafquiel. She showed him affection. Irina blushed as she noted that Anselmo was a gentle partner. Zenobia told Kenzo she loved him and leaned close in a heartfelt way. Drake apologized to Issei, sorrowful that his friend had been deceived. Rosweiss, Kaneko, Asia, and Ravel were with other boys but only gave them polite cheek kisses, saying they needed to get to know them more before taking any further steps. Unable to bear it any longer, Issei burst from the bushes and confronted the group, demanding what it meant. Louis answered with a smug smile that they were spending time with their girlfriends. The girls were stunned to see Issei so distressed. Rias tried to explain, but Issei cut her off, proclaiming that the promises of eternal love had been broken. He declared the engagements over for everyone and told them to live their lives happily, then ran away before anyone could stop him. Rias called for Issei to wait and reached for him, but her boyfriend refused to let go. The girls apologized and chased after Issei. The boys gathered, smiling, and announced that the first phase was complete. Then they vanished inside a magic circle. Watching the people who had claimed to love him, Issei began to run as fast as he could to a place where he would not have to see them and where no one could witness his pain. He cried out, asking why this always happened to him, why his heart was always broken when he opened it to someone. Drake stayed close, troubled. He assured Issei that he was sorry and promised to remain by his friend's side until the end. Issei sobbed that he had tried to change for them. He had reformed his behavior, stopped acting inappropriately, studied harder, learned to behave in high society to meet their families, and trained to be stronger so he could protect them. He had made himself into someone he thought they could love, and now he felt wrecked. Drake worried that Issei's emotional state could trigger the Juggernaut drive and cause a dangerous loss of control. He urged Issei to calm down and suggested leaving the city for a while to meditate and think clearly. Drake confessed that he cared for Issei like a son and did not want anything bad to happen to him. Those words steadied Issei. Grateful, Issei said he loved Drake like a father and decided to put distance between himself and the girls. He planned to look into annulling the engagements later. For now, he ran toward the city gates of Kuo to rest. Thanks to the deodorant he had created through his chemistry research, Issei had been able to mask his unique scent that yokai used to find him. He had also developed an experimental drag that could temporarily suppress his dragon and demonic aura, making him appear human for a few hours. The prototype had never been tested on him before. Even after putting distance between them, Issei felt the girls' auras following him. They could track him by scent and by the pawn piece that belonged to his master. He reached the hills outside the city and entered a forest. He found a log to sit on, took out a syringe and the small vial of the drag he had created, and began to fill the syringe. Drake, alarmed, pleaded with Issei not to use it and warned that the drag could be dangerous and that he did not even know all its effects. Issei responded calmly that he had nothing to lose. If the experiment failed, he could refine it later. Drake argued that the drag could harm him and reminded Issei that there were other women who had not betrayed him and who might help. He urged Issei to face the situation instead of taking drastic measures. Issei told Drake that he had finished preparing the syringe and that the change would be significant. If the drag worked, it would be a major breakthrough in his research and would free him from the burdens he felt. If it failed, he would allow himself to be captured and accept the consequences. He considered two possible outcomes if he were taken after using the drag. In the first, his captors would alter his memories and continue deceiving him, leaving him a loyal pawn in a life of lies. In the second, they would invent slander about him to his family, leaders, and other supernatural beings, turning everyone against him and stripping him of everything he had, including Drake. Issei was distressed and worried as he prepared to take action. Drake shouted in panic as Issei applied the dose to his forearm, pleading for him not to do it. Issei waited for the effects, feeling at first that he could not communicate with Drake and that he could not draw out his power or the booster gear. Then, to his relief, it worked. Issei realized his research had succeeded. He had created an artificial way to reduce his aura and become human. He laughed with manic joy at the change, celebrating that his experiment had worked and that he no longer sensed Drake. He told himself he was human now and felt a reckless sense of freedom, convinced that no one would find him. Meanwhile, Rias and the others ran toward Issei's house and rushed to his room, but found it empty. Rias felt panic and called out for him, unable to locate him. Kaneko reported that she could not sense his scent and that even when he had revealed himself before she had been unable to detect him, as if his presence had been altered. Aquino urged everyone to keep searching rather than dwell on regret. Rosweiss suggested searching by using the pawn pieces. Zenobia concentrated and offered to track him by aura. Irina proposed they split up to search the city. Rias closed her eyes, focused, and began to emanate a red aura, using the power of the king piece to find Issei anywhere in both the human and supernatural worlds. She opened her eyes and sensed his presence outside the city, then formed a teleportation circle and arrived at the city entrance. The group tried to lock onto Issei's aura together. They felt a faint signal that vanished suddenly among the hills at the city's edge. The girls reacted with stunned disbelief. Rias organized their search. Irina and Zenobia would go north through the hills, Kaneko and Ravel east, Rosweiss and Asia west, and Aquino and Rias south. Each woman acknowledged the plan. Rias reminded them they had little time as night was falling, and they all vowed to find Issei. Some time later, night had fallen over Kuo City. The group regrouped at the city entrance, exhausted and distraught that they had not found him. Rias activated a teleportation circle back to Issei's house. Issei was walking to find shelter for the night when the drag's side effects took hold. Disturbing visions appeared, figures from his past and from his fears: Ryanair, Dodora Astroth, Shalba Beelzebub, the exorcist Fried Zelson, and other renegade supernatural beings he had once faced loomed in his mind. He froze with fear as these apparitions stared at him and began to laugh mockingly. Issei trembled and clutched his head, insisting internally that this could not be happening. Shalba mocked him with derision, implying he had lost his voice. Fried mimicked the taunt and joined in the ridiculing. Dodora accused him of losing what mattered to him by calling him selfish and mocking his bravery. Ryanair and the others sneered that he had failed to fight properly for his loved ones. The taunts compounded his panic and desperation. Issei realized the formula needed improvement. If the hallucinations continued, his old fears would return more often. At an unknown location, 8 men bowed before a figure seated on a throne who calmly sipped wine. Lewis informed the man on the throne that Phase 1 of their plan was complete and asked for instructions for Phase 2. The man produced a device through a portal and handed it to Lewis, telling him it would serve as a weapon to execute the next phase. Lewis accepted it solemnly and departed with the others. The man on the throne laughed, pleased that his obstacle would soon be removed. Back at the mansion, the girls gathered in the living room, sitting on the sofas, each heavy with worry and guilt. They were afraid for Issei and ashamed because they had been seen spending time with other men without being honest with him. Rias quietly expressed her hope that Issei would return and her desire to speak with him and try to earn his forgiveness. Asia, in a drawn voice, said she knew Issei well and believed he might forgive them, but warned that he might never trust them the same way again. She feared they had reopened a painful wound in his heart and began to cry. Aquino, Kaneko, and Asia then told the others about the depth of Issei's fear. They explained that it began when he had been involved with Ryanair and she had killed him because of his sacred gear. They described how the fallen angels had mocked him for believing in a romantic connection, and they recalled the violent episode connected to Asia's rescue, when he had defeated an opponent who later pleaded for mercy. The room fell silent as the weight of those memories settled on them. Because of that trauma, Issei kept his distance whenever they tried to get closer and refused to call Rias by her name, always addressing her as president or captain. The others noticed Issei's expression and decided to help him overcome his trauma by telling him they loved him, that they would always stand by him, that they would not hurt or abandon him. After they finished the conversation, they all cried and regretted the harm they had caused the brown-haired young man, worried that he might never forgive them or return. A few hours later, they slept in Issei's room so they could talk and make things right when he came back. Outside Kuo City, in the forest, Issei tried to endure the insults of the supernatural beings surrounding him. The creatures laughed and mocked him. Fried taunted him about his misfortune, and Dodora added a cruel comment meant to humiliate him. Shalba sneered that love was for the weak. Ryanair spoke coldly and with malice, telling him that being reincarnated had left him vulnerable and that others only stayed with him for his power, warning that he would be left alone if he lost it. Issei begged to be left alone. In anger he grabbed a stick and ran at the phantoms, but his blows passed through them, which only deepened his frustration. The supernatural creatures jeered at his futile attacks and kept taunting him through the night, even breaking into mocking songs about him. The next morning Issei woke up dangling from a tree, unsure how he had gotten there. When he moved, he fell to the ground and found himself alone. The peculiar side effects of the substance he had been given were beginning to fade, although it had produced the intended result. It also had psychotropic aftereffects he needed to address, and he resolved to improve it and plan his next steps. Seeing the time, he guessed the others had gone to the academy and university, so he decided to return home to rest and think. His phone was offline, so he opened a portal and went back to his house. At home, the girls woke to find Issei still gone and felt discouraged. They went about their morning routine, showered, dressed, and ate breakfast, each worried that he might not be all right. They left for school hoping he would return. Issei arrived later, went to his room, showered, and slept for a few hours after activating a portal suppressor. When he woke and ate, he spent time thinking about the future. He took out a notebook and began listing what he would need and how to get it, aware that he did not have enough money from his salary with Dragon Pay and that most profits went to the Gremory family. He made a long list of equipment and supplies he would need to obtain and then began checking prices on his laptop, knowing some items would have to be acquired through dangerous channels. He also began considering how to raise the funds to reclaim what he felt was rightfully his. He hacked a neighbor's Wi-Fi to get online and used a privacy browser to search the deep web for the Gremory family's bank accounts, and the results left him stunned. Aside from being billionaires, they had multiple bank accounts in several countries. Rias had 3 accounts, one in the Cayman Islands, another in the United States Virgin Islands, and one in Luxembourg. Serzerx had 6 accounts, in the same countries as Rias plus the Galapagos Islands, the Seychelles and Liechtenstein. Zeoticus and Venelana had accounts in the same countries as Serzerx. Issei obtained software to access the bank's databases and modified the code so it could operate directly without needing confirmation from a bank employee. He used it to find the accounts, passwords, security combinations, and balances. Issei then created a fake account at a bank in Madagascar and transferred a total of $3 million from the Gremory accounts into that account to make the loss less obvious. After moving the money to his own bank account, he closed the Madagascar account. Seeing his balance, Issei was elated and immediately began buying everything he needed, from small items to arranging procurement of weapons and a biological chamber. The orders were to be delivered to his new home, located near the center of Kuro. It was an ordinary house for an ordinary family. He signed the paperwork, received the keys, inspected the house, then moved some of his belongings from his old home. After settling in, Issei erected a suppressive barrier around the house to prevent any supernatural beings from finding him. His inseparable companion Drake woke and was surprised by the place. It was unfamiliar to him. Drake asked where they were, and Issei replied that this was their new home and base of operations. Issei said he would conduct all his research and tests here so he could prepare for betrayal and defend himself. He added, remembering his mother's warning, that if someone hurt him once he would return it threefold, and he smiled grimly at that thought. Drake fell silent, uneasy about the future and hoping the situation would resolve quickly. Issei laughed loudly and reflected on his first crime, admitting to himself that he had stolen from the Gremory for a cause he believed just everything had been for a friend he considered like a father. He acknowledged that he had made many mistakes and committed crimes, which had led him to where he was. He remembered being in a cell when footsteps approached. The door opened and 6 figures entered, a doctor, 3 prison guards, and 2 soldiers carrying rifles. The warden sneered and announced that they had the world's most dangerous criminal and gave Issei his name, calling him the magical Issei. The warden mocked his fame for escaping and declared that his trial would be broadcast to the world for all to see. The doctor then administered a sedative dart to make Issei compliant. Issei protested angrily that he should have waited for the trial before being sedated, but the staff explained they had only given a sedative to keep him still. As the dose took effect, Issei became paralyzed and the guards proceeded to bind his limbs, cover his eyes, and secure him for transport. The guards prepared him for transfer, believing it unlikely he would attempt another escape. They moved him through the prison corridors with a heavy escort. Other inmates watched as he was taken under guard by soldiers and officers. Outside, an armored military vehicle waited. The guards placed Issei inside, positioned soldiers beside him, sealed the vehicle, and departed for the Supreme Court where his trial would be held. Inside the armored vehicle, Issei reflected that his time might be coming soon. He thought that at least he had fulfilled his friend's dream and hoped his friend would not witness the trial. He remembered how hard he had fought to achieve that dream. Issei then remembered a conversation with Drake in his new home. Drake had asked where he had obtained all the equipment. Issei had explained that he bought those items when he acquired the house and intended to use it as his research base to pursue his true goal. Drake had teased that Issei's dream was to become the king of a harem, but Issei had replied that his real dream was to free Drake from the sacred gear and to become human again himself. To that end, had purchased weapons for protection and a biological chamber to create a new body so he could perform the separation procedure. Issei had bought a revolver, a shotgun, an M16 rifle, and a rocket launcher to defend against possible betrayal. Drake had expressed concern that Issei might die attempting such things. Issei had answered that he had found books explaining how to separate sacred gear from bodies and how to permanently release sealed beings by creating a new body, and that the biological chamber was necessary for that process. Issei calmly showed the biological chamber to his companion. Drake raised a delicate point and asked whether Issei would speak with the girls about his decision, reminding him that he needed to clear things up. Issei answered calmly that he would talk with them. He also wanted to understand their reasons, admitting he had acted immaturely and noting that Kuroka and Lufei had not betrayed him since they were on a mission with Valet and the others. At the very least, he should respect them. Drake listened attentively and felt relieved that Issei was not thinking of revenge. Issei suggested they tidy everything to begin work more quickly. He arranged the equipment, showered, ate a little, and rested to be fully prepared for his main experiment. The next day, Issei activated the biological chamber to form a human body. To supply the machine, he provided a small tissue sample and a vial of his blood, and he added the liquid required for human transformation. The first formula produced an undesirable psychotropic effect, so he refined it to avoid hallucinations. He placed the samples into the machine. As it filled with fluid, he cast a spell to accelerate the process. What would have taken 6 months was reduced to roughly 1 month by his magic. He also began developing a compact device that combined sacred, dark, and anti-dragon magic into a single compressed ordnance. Although he remained composed, anxiety about the future showed through. Late in the day, he decided to speak with the girls. He gathered his courage and left the house. Sensing their auras and finding them together in the park where everything had started, he created a portal and arrived. The girls were with some boys but had stepped away from them. Issei noticed something strange. The boys did not seem normal. He took photographs of their faces. After the girls left, their expressions shifted unnaturally from sorrow to cruel smiles, which alarmed him. Back home, he aligned his antenna to a satellite and searched for information about those men on his laptop. When radio scans for supernatural signatures yielded nothing, he installed hidden cameras and microphones in strategic locations, masking his aura while doing so. He placed devices at Kuo Academy and Kuo University, his old house, the Gremory Mansion, the Citri Mansion, the Beelzebub Mansion, the Asmodeus Mansion, the Demon Council where Lilith sat, across Grigori, Odin's castle in Asgard, the Yasaka Mansion in Kyoto, Olympus in Greece, the Celestial Council in the heavens, the Teeps Mansion in Romania, and the domain of the god Shiva. It was a tremendous effort to install everything without being noticed, but he succeeded. The feeds from the devices were routed through a small portal antenna to the parabolic dish at his home. Once activated, images and audio streams began to arrive. He recorded the material and went to sleep exhausted. A week later, Issei monitored the biological chamber and watched the new body forming rapidly. He felt pleased with the progress. He inspected the devices he had made and used the downtime to compress dragon shot into bullets, making them as potent as the original attack. From the camera and microphone feeds he learned many things, embarrassing details about some leaders and, crucially, that the girls had ended their relationships with the boys. That complicated his investigation, since the names he had were false and the men appeared to be supernatural. Resolving that he needed to speak with the girls to remove his doubts, Issei prepared himself. Drake encouraged him, telling him to stay calm and that he would do well. Issei drew a magic circle and arrived at his old house. Nothing there had changed. He waited for the girls to arrive. When they entered, they immediately recognized his aura and hurried to the living room where Issei sat on the sofa. The girls were surprised and whispered his name, relieved but stunned to see him alive since they had thought he was dead. Issei lightly deflected sentimentality and explained that he had come to clear things up and wanted honest answers. The girls sat down. Issei asked them all to answer with complete honesty and without interruptions. He addressed Rias first and requested the truth. He wanted to know the name of the boy, why she had deceived him, and why none of them had told him anything. A short, neutral pause followed as each girl gathered herself and prepared to explain. Issei listened intently to their responses, determined to understand their reasons and to resolve the matter between them. Issei asked the redhead, making her nervous. The brown-haired boy took out a notebook and a pencil to write down everything she answered, though in truth he only wanted the names of the boys. Issei asked Rias what the boy's name was, why she had betrayed him, and why she had not told him. Rias answered that his name was Louis Belial, a high-class demon of House Belial. She said he had been a childhood friend and, over time, their relationship had grown beyond friendship. They had once been expected to be engaged. Then one day he disappeared. A long time passed. Rias thought he had grown bored and, to learn about the human world, she enrolled at Crow Academy. She said she had met Issei there when he put himself at risk for her. It had awakened feelings she had once had for Louis, which she had set aside until Louis returned. When the new university year began, Rias said. She saw Louis on campus. They recognized each other and greeted one another. The old feeling returned, and as days passed she drew closer to him until they resumed the relationship they had had before. She introduced Louis to her clan and to the other girls, and she admitted that she had been happy with him. He later brought friends to meet the others. Rias explained that she had not told Issei because she had been confused and did not want to hurt him. She had thought it would be temporary. Instead, she found herself falling more in love with Louis and even considered abandoning her commitments to be with him and his circle. When she saw how devastated Issei was, she began to regret her choices. She searched for him everywhere and tried every method she could think of. In the hills she noticed his aura vanish abruptly and they feared the worst. Rias asked Kiba, Gasper, and the Citri clan for help, but they could not find him. They even thought he might be dead, and Rias felt awful. After thinking clearly, she ended her relationship with Louis, made the situation clear, and decided to wait for Issei because she believed he needed time to think and that they should speak when he returned. Rias recounted this with tears in her eyes but felt glad to have told the truth. Issei then asked Asia the same questions. The boy's name, why she had deceived him, and why she had not told him. Asia answered that his name was Vincenzo Carniglia, an exorcist of the church and a friend of Louis. At first she had been guarded with him, but he had always been attentive and considerate. They often spoke about the church, and those conversations had made her feel good. She had not become his girlfriend, though she had felt something for him and had thought about taking the next step. Asia said she had not told Issei because Rias had instructed her not to reveal anything until the right moment. Issei then asked Aquino the same questions. Aquino replied that his name was Zafquiel, a fallen angel who had once served in heaven but had fallen because of a romantic attachment. She had met him at university when she was with Louis and Rias. He noticed her and they began to talk. They had much in common, and he admired her father. Over time she came to care for him and they began a relationship. Aquino said she felt ashamed when Issei discovered them. She remembered everything Issei had done for her, and she felt like the worst person in the world. She expressed deep remorse and said she did not feel worthy of his forgiveness. She explained that she had not told him because she had pushed thoughts of him from her mind until that day. Issei then turned to Ravel and asked the same questions. Ravel, crying, said the boy's name was Mateus Asmodeus, a high-class demon descended from the original Mao Asmodeus. Ravel had met him when Rius introduced them. He had been attentive and affectionate and cared for her. They talked for hours about demonic clans. He has to be her boyfriend, and she had hoped to take things slowly, but Issei discovered their relationship. Ravel said she had not told Issei earlier because she lacked the courage and feared he would leave her forever. Issei then addressed Kaneko with the same questions. In her Nikomata form, Kaneko lowered her ears and said his name was Kenji Najima, another Nikomata. She had met him when Rius introduced her to her boyfriend and the others. Discovering he was a Nikomata sparked in Kaneko a desire to protect and preserve their kind. They got to know one another, and he proposed being partners, but she refused because she was with Issei. Kenji had said he would wait until her relationship with Issei ended. Kaneko said she had not told Issei out of shame. Issei then asked Irina those same questions. Irina, trembling and crying, said the boy's name was Anselmo Garcia, an exorcist of the church whom she had met through Rius. They had talked often about the church, heaven, saints, and seraphim, and she had felt drawn to him. She became his girlfriend and they dated for a time. Irina declared that she would not apologize for her mistakes and intended to use this chance to atone for what she felt were her faults. Finally, Issei asked Zenobia the same 3 questions. Zenobia, tense, said his name was Kenzo Ishikawa, a member of the Ishikawa clan of swordsmen. She had met him through Rius and the others. He always carried a katana and had caught her attention. They began to speak about sword techniques and trained together at his residence. Over time Zenobia fell in love with him and they became a couple, but everything ended when Issei discovered the relationship. She said she had not told him because she had not thought of him during that PRD. Zenobia spoke sadly, finishing in tears. Issei asked Rosweiss who the boy was, why she had deceived him, and why she had kept silent, and Rosweiss felt ashamed and sad as she answered. She explained that the man's name was Henrik Larsson, a soldier of Odin from Asgard. Rius had introduced them. Henrik was from Norway and loved Norse mythology and traditions. They had talked a lot about Asgard and lost track of time. Rosweiss said she had begun seeing him and had been attracted to him, and he had asked her to end her relationship with Issei so they could be together. Everything had ended when Issei discovered them and the others. She had planned to speak with Issei that night, but it had become unnecessary. Issei thanked them for answering his questions and said he had something to say. The girls, discouraged, asked what he intended to say. Issei said that he forgave them for what they had done, but that did not mean he would trust them again. When the girls asked why, he explained that he forgave them because he understood how such a situation could happen. He admitted he might have acted similarly if seduced, and because, by law in their country, he should have only one partner, he recognized his own hypocrisy. Remained calm as he surprised the girls with his honesty. Issei went on to explain that he had changed for them. He had given up his former perversions, trained harder, focused on studying, and planned many projects with them for the future. He had fought every day to make them proud, devoting himself completely. He had even saved money to buy gifts and take them all to a restaurant in Paris, and had learned better manners to surprise them. All of that effort felt ruined the moment he saw them with those other men. He said he had been destroyed inside and began to question whether he had been a good boyfriend and whether he was worthy of them. His voice grew sad and he began to cry. The girls reacted with surprise and sorrow as they realized how Issei must have felt. Issei then described how, that night, he started having hallucinations of Ryanair and other supernatural beings who mocked him throughout the night, turning it into a form of mental torture. He said he had wanted to end his misery, but he had remembered that there were women who loved him and remained faithful, and out of respect for them he had not taken any drastic action. Despite that restraint, his confidence had been shattered and he did not know what to do. Overcome by emotion, he lost control and clutched his head. The girls moved to approach, but Drake warned them that Issei was having an emotional crisis and they should not get too close. Issei then took a syringe from his pocket and filled it with liquid. Drake pleaded with him not to do it, fearful for Issei's mind. Issei administered the dose and collapsed to the floor, his body trembling as the medication took effect. The girls watched in horror, unable to help. After a few moments Issei ceased moving, and the girls grew increasingly worried, but he began to rise slowly with difficulty and noticed a used syringe on the ground. He realized the medication had worked to stabilize him and called for Drake. Drake asked if he was all right, and Issei confirmed that the medication had been effective. The girls calmed somewhat, though sadness remained over the consequences of their actions. Issei asked for time to recover, repeated that he forgave them but would not immediately trust them again, and requested that if they wanted his trust back they demonstrate it through actions rather than words. He asked that, if they truly loved him, they love him for who he was and not for what he had. After surprising the girls, he picked up a notebook and pencil and moved toward the door. Rias expressed hope that he would come to love them again, and the others nodded. Before leaving, Issei asked them to tell Kuroka and Lu Fei the truth. The girls silently vowed to help him heal. A short pause followed. With all the accounts compiled, Issei reflected that those other men had seemed like ideal matches because they shared the same tastes as the girls, which made him suspect that someone or some group wanted to target him. The men appeared to be agents carrying out another's designs, and Issei worried about what that might mean for his safety and for those around him. Elsewhere, Kuroka said she missed Issei and wanted to see him, and Lu Fei agreed but reminded her that they still had a mission to complete and hoped it would end soon. Vala thought about Issei and hoped he had become strong, eager for the chance to challenge him. Back at Issei's house he searched for information on those men, worried that the situation might become dangerous for everyone nearby. Some time later, after his release from detention, an armored vehicle transported him toward an airstrip where a military transport plane waited. As the vehicle reached the plane and doors opened, soldiers disembarked to receive the prisoner. Suddenly the soldiers beside Issei seized him and forced him to the ground. The soldiers mocked him, referring to him as Magic Issei and taunting that he could not escape because he was restrained. Sergeant Watson mocked him and then kicked the brown-haired man in the stomach. Issei could only take the blow and writhe in pain. His mouth had been gagged, so he could only make muted noises with his body. Corporal First Class Smith laughed and announced that it was his turn, striking the brown-haired man hard in the back. Issei twisted from the pain. The cloth over his mouth began to show the effects of the assault. The soldiers laughed as they watched him being tortured. One of the soldiers proposed a game as a final mockery, calling it a farewell to the so-called magical Issei, since they assumed he would die anyway. He explained that they would use him like a ball, keeping him from touching the ground. The others agreed and crowded around the brown-haired prisoner. Sergeant Watson and Corporal Smith pulled Issei to his feet, loosening one of the restraints on his legs. They shoved him toward a soldier who landed a solid punch to his side. Issei moved and another soldier struck his back. He shifted again and took a blow to the stomach. They continued in that pattern, pushing and striking him like a cruel game, until he collapsed to the floor. The soldiers then kicked him until they grew exhausted. Issei breathed heavily and sobbed silently, his eyes covered and his face battered, his body aching from the repeated blows. He thought he would not be able to endure much longer, then slipped into unconsciousness. The soldiers panted from exertion. Watson, exhausted, observed that the young man had held out longer than most. Corporal Smith, out of breath, noted that others had ended up broken or unconscious for days after similar beatings. The plane's pilot, watching, commented that it was a shame for a young man with a future to have fallen into such circumstances. Had he chosen a different path, he might have ended up a good father and a comrade. Coleman, searching the interior of the plane, noted that Issei seemed to have fallen asleep. He added that they had followed orders to administer exemplary punishment, and that should be enough to prevent another escape. Now they needed to prepare him for the trial in Washington. Sergeant Watson cut the fabrics that bound Issei, freeing his feet, hands, eyes, and mouth, and tore the prisoner outfit. The soldiers examined the many bruises and marks across his body. Coleman found a jerrycan of water inside the plane and poured water over Issei to clean his face and body of bloodstains. When they finished, they placed a dark hood over his head again. Coleman returned to fetch another prison uniform, a towel, and a deodorant. He approached Issei and tried to rouse him, but there was no reaction. Coleman asked Corporal Smith to wake Issei Hayadu so they could hand him the towel and the new clothes. Smith complied and used a stun device while Issei's body was still wet. The electric shock made Issei convulse violently and tremble as the current slammed through him. Two soldiers lifted Issei while Coleman handed over the towel for him to dry off. Coleman told him to dry himself. Issei dabbed at his face and tried to dry his body, wincing as pain flared in his arms, torso, and back. When he finished, Coleman handed him the deodorant and told him to use it so he would not smell at the trial. Issei applied the spray to his underarms, torso, and neck, flinching as the wounds stung from the irritation. Coleman and the other soldiers escorted Issei and helped him into a fresh prisoner uniform. Coleman assisted him in dressing, noticing how battered his body looked beneath the clothing. Once his new clothes were on, they shackled his hands and feet with chained cuffs that limited his movement. Two soldiers sat on either side of him and two more across from him, all armed. The pilot started the engines, requested and received clearance to take off, and the aircraft set course north toward Washington. As the plane crossed the continent, the soldiers chatted among themselves while Issei sat with the hood covering his head, tears running silently. He felt resigned and thought that he had failed to clear his name. Everything was coming to an end and his suffering would soon be over. He told himself he had acted for a good reason. A memory surfaced. A week had passed since Issei had last spoken with the girls. He had not stopped investigating the ex-boyfriends of those women. His last option was to infiltrate the physical archives of the courts belonging to the factions involved, which meant traveling to Kyoto, the Vatican, Lilith's domain, and Grigory's enclave. He could not shake the suspicion that they had planned something beyond simply killing him. He believed they would not get their hands dirty themselves but would use the girls to carry out the murder and then abandon them. If the girls were then declared traitors and executed, it would clear the way for their larger objectives, an invasion or mass killings. With that conviction, he decided to reach out to Surzek's Lucifer and request authorization to access the underworld's judicial archives. The Mao asked how he and the girls were doing, and Issei hid the truth, saying they were fine and happy. They spoke of trivial matters until Issei decided to ask Surzek if he could consult Lilith's judicial archive to investigate something. Surzek was intrigued but authorized the review on the condition that it would be done under supervision. After speaking with Surzek, Issei called his master Azazel to arrange access to Grigory's files. Azazel agreed to help search for the needed documents but said he would first have to obtain authorization from Shenhazai. Azazel told Issei he would call once he had the clearance. Issei then called Yasaka, who was pleased and happily agreed to help, appreciating the chance to spend time with him and his daughter. Finally, Issei called Michael, and Michael granted permission to access the Vatican's resolutions archive, also under supervision. With the calls finished, Issei went to the investigation room to check the progress on the new body. He saw significant advancement and an idea came to him: to design a powerful weapon. He began writing and sketching its structure. A few hours later he finished the plans and quietly observed his work, thinking that the weapon would be unprecedented and, like a Trojan horse, would not be recognized as a weapon. He then reviewed the surveillance recordings and audio but found nothing beyond routine activity, which left him puzzled because he could not find the subjects or obtain new information. Unknown location. During training, Lewis concluded that the time for action was near. Kenzo admitted he was eager to settle the score and could hardly wait to defeat the one who had wronged him, speaking with obvious anger. Zafquil urged him to remain calm, confident that the opportunity would come. Henrik noted that Phase 2 of the plans still had to be completed before they could act. Anselmo reported that they had fully mastered their weapons and were only waiting for the order to execute Phase 2. Together they vowed to defeat the Red Emperor Dragon and to leave him with no allies when the time came. Investigation. Issei entered the archive, which housed many shelves of files, accompanied by Surzek as his supervisor. Inside the room there was an office where several demons performed the bureaucratic work of the justice system and stored records. A clerk approached them to attend to their request. Surzek instructed Issei to ask for what he needed. Issei requested all judicial resolutions for the Asmodeus and Belial families from the past 5 years, surprising Surzek with the breadth of the request. The clerk said he would retrieve the records and left to fetch them. They sat on sofas and talked about trivial matters while they waited. 2 hours later the clerk returned with several folders floating through the air and placed them on a long table. He announced that he had their documents and remained nearby in case they needed anything. Issei began examining each folder. After several hours he found what he needed: files that declared Louis Belial and Mateus as modius renegade demons for betrayal of demon society, and other records indicating they had been accused of killing high-ranking demons and subsequently executed. While Serzex and the clerk saw only Issei reading the documents, Issei had created a small barrier and discreetly scanned the records with a laser device, saving them to his laptop. Because the law prohibited removing or digitizing the documents without a court order, he sent the copies home through a magical circle and then lifted the barrier. Neither Serzex nor the clerk noticed. Issei thanked the clerk, who collected the folders and returned them to their place. Serzex and Issei left the judicial archive through a magic circle and returned to the Gremory mansion. Gremory mansion. Back in his office, Serzex noticed Issei's troubled expression and, growing serious, asked what was wrong. Issei admitted he was worried and asked whether Serzex knew Louis Belial and Mateus as Modius. Serzex explained that he knew Louis but not Mateus. He revealed that Louis had been executed 3 years earlier for betrayal. Louis had once been his brother-in-law and had been intended as a match for his sister Rias, a union that had made her happy as she had looked forward to marriage. Then Louis had attempted to assassinate the Mao Beelzebub and had later been linked to the deaths of several high-ranking demons. He had been declared a renegade, captured during an attempt to kidnap Rias, and executed. To spare Rias further pain, they had told her he had disappeared. Serzex said he had seen Rias regain her smile after meeting Issei. Issei said he had heard Rias mention a former love and wanted to know what had happened, though he did not disclose his true reasons for investigating. Serzex reassured Issei that Rias loved him and would not leave him, and that the past relationship had been from a younger, less mature time in her life. Issei hesitated, still carrying his doubts and concerns. Issei remained sad as he left. Serzex teased him that Rias loved him and was devoted to him with her heart and soul, which made Issei blush. Serzex added that Rias was busy preparing for the wedding and eager for the day to arrive, and he jokingly hinted about what would come after the marriage, making Issei laugh and redden. Issei thanked him and felt calmer as he prepared to leave. Serzex asked him to give his regards to Rias and the others. Issei returned home through a magic circle. At Issei's house, he reviewed what he had found and noticed a troubling inconsistency. Someone was reviving the dead without using Valerie's sacred gear. If an artificial sacred gear had not been made or another method had not been found for resurrection, that would be a grave problem. If the dead could be revived en masse for an invasion, and they could be revived again. After being killed, the fragile peace between factions could collapse, perhaps even endangering humanity. Issei worried. Drake's voice sounded concerned, warning that this was a serious problem. Issei replied that if they did not solve it soon, things would end very badly. Drake asked if Issei referred to the young men he had mentioned. Issei confirmed that 2 of them had been dead 3 years ago, executed for treason in the underworld, and that something or someone was bringing them back. Drake insisted that Issei should tell the faction leaders so they could prepare a strategy to neutralize the enemy. Issei rejected that course. He intended to confront them personally. He wanted to end them with his own hands and track down their leader, who seemed to know him well and had revived those 2 lackeys. Drake warned that Issei would need help, even if he defeated all the revived. If he did not find the origin of the resurrection, they would keep coming back. Issei explained that he had been compiling data to form a covert strategy, training in new techniques and magics, and developing a superweapon he planned to test on them once he could reach their leader. Drake asked him to call if he needed anything. After their conversation, Issei worked late into the night in his laboratory. The next day, Issei traveled to the Vatican in Rome to the Ecclesiastical Judicial Archives. Michael and Monsignor Franco Arati were waiting inside. Michael greeted him warmly and introduced him to Monsignor Arati, who was in charge of the Judicial Archive. Issei bowed and introduced himself respectfully. Monsignor Arati asked how he could help. Issei requested the judicial files for Vincenzo Carniglia and Anselmo Garcia. Michael appeared surprised by the request. Monsignor Arati left to retrieve the documents while Issei and Michael sat and spoke about trivial matters. An hour later, Monsignor Arati returned and indicated that the files were ready, escorting them to a library-like office. He laid out the folders on the table. Issei began to review the records and found a startling pattern. Vincenzo Carniglia had been a powerful church exorcist and a possible candidate for angelic reincarnation. He had been tried for serious misconduct and murder, declared a renegade exorcist, and later killed by Griselda Corda. Anselmo Garcia had been an exorcist in the Latin Church, tried for corruption, drug trafficking, human trafficking, and murder, declared a renegade exorcist, and later killed by Giulio Gesualdo. Everything began to fit for Issei. The first 4 subjects he had investigated had been killed by their own factions, yet now they were alive, reinforcing his belief that they were pawns of someone else. He raised a barrier like the one he had used in the underworld, digitized the papers, and saved them to his laptop. Once the procedure was complete, he sent the originals home through a portal and lowered the barrier. Issei thanked Monsignor Arati for his assistance, and the Monsignor invited him to return whenever he wished. Issei and Michael moved to another room to speak privately. Michael observed that Issei seemed strange and offered his help, saying he could trust him. Issei said that Asia and Irina had mentioned those men while talking about handsome men they had met, which surprised him because they had never said that before. He had decided to investigate. Michael reassured Issei, telling him that the girls loved him wholeheartedly and would not leave him for anyone, no matter how strong or attractive. He said he had seen it in their eyes when he visited and urged Issei not to worry and to move forward with his life. Issei thanked Michael and left through a magic circle after Michael offered further help if needed. Back at home, Issei sat on the sofa, pleased that he was gradually piecing together the truth. He vowed that the responsible party would pay for what they had done. Azazel then called to inform him that he had been authorized to review judicial files in Grigori. Issei changed and headed to Azazel's apartment in central Kuro. A short time later, Issei rang the bell at Azazel's apartment. Azazel opened the door and welcomed him inside, asking why he had not attended school for 2 weeks and expressing concern that everyone was worried about him. Azazel asked Issei curiously what was going on. Issei reassured his former leader that nothing was wrong, that he was handling his own affairs and investigating something important, which only deepened Azazel's curiosity. Azazel asked what the investigation concerned. Issei explained that he was searching records on a fallen angel named Zafquiel and wanted to know if there were any criminal files. Azazel suggested going to Grigori's archives, and after Issei agreed, Azazel opened a magic circle that led them to the penal archive. They arrived inside the Grigori penal archive. Azazel handed Issei a validation card to access the files, and they swiped the cards at a reader. The doors opened, revealing a room full of servers and active computers running background check software. Azazel told Issei to search for the information he needed. Issei sat down and began the search. He checked a 5-year range and found nothing. He extended the range to 20 years with no results. Only when he searched across 100 years did a record for Zafquiel appear. Issei created a small barrier so Azazel would see the screen, then opened a hidden portal and produced a USB drive. He connected it to the computer and used a sequence of commands to unlock the interface. After a few minutes, the system accepted the device and Issei exported all the data on Zafquiel to the drive. When the transfer finished, he restored the interface and removed the barrier. Issei told Azazel he was done and asked him to look. Azazel approached and frowned at what he saw. Azazel, who had been watching the screen, became worried and asked Issei what this meant. The file showed a photograph of Zafquiel and his history. The most relevant details indicated that Zafquiel had once been a fallen angel in Azazel's service and had been killed during the Second World War by a demon. Azazel asked if Issei wanted to know more, but Issei suggested they talk somewhere more private. Azazel opened a magic circle and transported them to his former residence. In Azazel's apartment, he produced a bottle of liquor, an ice bucket, and 2 glasses. They sat across from one another and began to speak while they drank. Azazel asked Issei to tell him everything. Issei explained that while some of the girls had been talking about their romantic experiences among themselves, a few names had come up, including Zafquil. He had overheard by chance and had grown curious. When he dug into the archives and found Zafquil listed as deceased, the most plausible explanation seemed to be that someone had revived him. Based on what he knew, Valerie possessed a sacred gear with properties similar to a holy grail that could revive the dead, but it could be used only a limited number of times. Issei did not think Valerie would be doing that herself. He suspected the existence of an artificial sacred gear or some other method that could bring someone back. Azazel acknowledged that Issei's theory made sense, but he also reminded him that they had dismantled the Chaos Brigade some time ago and assumed peace had been restored. If Issei's suspicion were true and the enemy had found a way to resurrect the dead, it could pose a serious threat. Issei admitted he might be exaggerating, but warned that if the enemy regrouped and achieved that capability, the consequences could be dire. Azazel told him they would face whatever came and not to worry. They finished their drinks and moved on to trivial topics and tales of knighthood, speaking late into the night. The next morning, Sunday, Issei planned to visit Yasaka and the younger fox spirit Kunu and to seek information on the last 3 remaining names he needed. After showering and getting dressed, he had breakfast, spoke with Drake for a while, and checked a biological device. He sighed, then opened a magic circle toward Yasaka's mansion in Kyoto. Issei arrived at the entrance of Yasaka's mansion and saw Kunu. The younger fox spirit greeted him with a hug and climbed onto his back. Issei asked how she had been and apologized for not visiting more often, explaining he had been busy with his duties. Kunu said she had been training hard and learning many things to become stronger, speaking with pride. The older fox spirit Yasaka arrived, saw Issei with Kunu on his back, and happily rushed over to greet him. Yasaka tearfully accused him of abandoning her and demanded an explanation. She hugged him tightly in an exaggerated, dramatic way that left Issei muffled but unharmed, and Yasaka's loud cry echoed across the neighborhood. After composing themselves, Issei asked Yasaka for information on Kenzo Ishikawa and Kenjo Nashima, mentioning that Kenjo was a Nikomata, which surprised her. Yasaka agreed to help and offered to take him to Japan's intelligence department. Issei told Kunu they would return shortly, and Yasaka created a magic circle that transported them to the National Intelligence Department in Tokyo. They arrived at an office where a police officer promptly approached them. Yasaka greeted Colonel Amada warmly and handed him an envelope, requesting information on the people they were investigating. Colonel Amada opened the envelope and saw 2 photos of each subject's face and a sheet containing their details. He told them he would look into the backgrounds of these people and that they could take a seat while he handled the paperwork. He left, and Yasaka and Issei sat on a sofa in the waiting room. They began to talk about trivial matters and about Issei's personal life. Yasaka noticed a shift in his emotions when the conversation turned to the girls and suspected he was hiding things, which worried her. After almost an hour, Colonel Amada returned with a folder of documents. He told Yasaka that her request was ready and handed her the folder. Yasaka and Issei reviewed the papers and were surprised by what they read. Yasaka thanked Colonel Amada, who replied that he was at her service. Yasaka then activated a magic circle and transported herself and Issei back to Kyoto. They arrived at the Yasaka mansion. Kunu climbed onto Issei's back, making her mother laugh, and Issei suggested they go out to enjoy the city together. Yasaka and Kunu agreed, teasing him for lagging behind. They walked through Kyoto's temples, visited a fair for manga, anime, and light novels, ate at a local restaurant, and went to a mall to shop for clothes. Yasaka modeled different outfits for Issei, causing him to blush, and Kunu joined in, cheering when he gave a thumbs up. They went to the cinema and visited many places, finishing with a maid cafe where the adults had cake and coffee and Kunu enjoyed hot chocolate. They spoke about light, everyday things throughout the day. Night fell and the trio returned to the mansion, greeted by the guards. Yasaka linked arms with Issei and Kunu walked beside him. In the living room, Issei prepared to leave, but Yasaka offered for him to stay the night. He agreed, which pleased both kitsuns. A few hours later, after dinner and more conversation, Issei stepped out into the mansion's patio, sat, and gazed at a clear, starry sky. He relaxed for a moment, but then a memory of the girls surfaced and he grew sad. Yasaka watched him from inside and, sensing his sadness, came out to sit beside him. She looked into his eyes and saw the sorrow, bitterness, disappointment, and pessimism he carried. She asked him what had happened. Issei at first tried to say it was nothing, but then he broke down and cried. He confessed that everything was over. The girls had deceived him with the young men he had been investigating. He had changed himself for them, giving up old habits, focusing on his studies, and training to protect them, yet they had repaid him badly. He felt like garbage, convinced that no one could love him for who he truly was and that people only sought him out for his lineage. Yasaka felt deep sympathy. She told him to trust her, that she could see his pain and would not tell anyone, and that he was very important to her. She also told him that she and Kunu cared for him more than anyone else. Issei doubted her words. Before he could finish his thought, Yasaka leaned forward and kissed him gently. Issei resisted briefly but then accepted. The kiss expressed the depth of her feelings and comforted him. They embraced, and Yasaka comforted him through the night. They spent the hours talking and supporting each other, and their bond deepened. The next morning Issei said goodbye to both kitsuns. Yasaka gave him a warm farewell kiss on the cheek, and Kunu received a kiss on the forehead. Yasaka told him to take care, and Issei promised to visit soon before opening a magic circle and returning home. At his house, Issei changed clothes and went toward the city center. While walking, he felt someone hug him from behind. He turned and was surprised to see Kuroka. Kuroka greeted him affectionately and gave him a playful peck on the cheek. Lu Fei then appeared, embraced him warmly, and also gave him a friendly kiss on the cheek, commenting that it had been a while. The brown-haired man greeted both women warmly. They walked through the streets of Kuo. Issei hugged them as he asked how they had been. Lu Fei replied that they were sad about what had happened, which surprised him. Kuroka suggested they go somewhere comfortable to talk. Issei proposed eating first and then spending the afternoon together, and the women agreed. With a quick magic circle, both changed into new clothes. In the Kuo cafeteria, the three sat at a table away from the crowd. Issei had an espresso and a slice of chocolate pancake cake. Lu Fei had a latte and a tart, and Kuroka had hot chocolate and a slice of black forest cake. Issei asked when they had arrived. Lu Fei explained they arrived the night before and had searched for him all over the house but could not find him. Kuroka said they had tried to sense his presence and waited for the others. Lu Fei added that when the others arrived they asked about Issei. Kuroka noted that some of them were so upset that they excused themselves to the bathroom, overwhelmed. Lu Fei said the other girls had told them everything that had happened to Issei, and he listened intently. Lu Fei remembered the scene at the Hyudu residence living room. The Gremory girls had been sitting on the sofas looking defeated, while Kuroka and Lu Fei had watched them with serious expressions. Lu Fei had asked them what had happened to Issei. Rias had answered that he was no longer living there. Kuroka had demanded an explanation, and the others had revealed that a serious betrayal had occurred involving Issei. Kuroka had tensed and was about to react, but Lu Fei had held her back and told her to stay calm. One of the girls had turned pale and rushed off, feeling suddenly unwell. They had explained that the situation had happened a little over 3 weeks earlier and that Issei had not returned to live at the residence. A few days after, he had come to speak with them and question them about everything. He had been devastated, blaming himself and experiencing a severe emotional crisis that none of them could easily ease. He had been deeply distraught, and seeing him struggle to recover had broken them. Kaneko had cried, describing how painful it had been to watch him suffer as they tried to help. Kuroka and Lu Fei had been stunned by the girl's account. Rias had expressed regret and sorrow. Rosweiss had felt so ill she had left to be alone. Kaneko had apologized, saying they understood if the others wanted to hate them. Kuroka had gone to Kaneko and embraced her, assuring her that they forgave them and believed their remorse. Lu Fei had agreed that she could sense their genuine repentance, but she warned that if anything like that happened again she would make sure Issei never saw them again. The other Gremory girls had nodded in agreement. Back in the present at the cafeteria, Lu Fei finished her recollection. Kuroka asked Issei where he was staying now. Issei replied that he had bought a house near the center and was trying to recover from the incident, spending time alone to reflect. He asked the two women a favor, to take care of the other girls, since they had seemed very ill and fragile. He wanted them to at least make sure the others ate properly. Lu Fei agreed but asked him to visit often. Issei promised he would when he could. Kuroka suggested they make the most of the day and catch up, and Issei agreed, paying the bill and leaving the cafeteria with the two women. At the Kuo Mall, they walked through clothing stores. Kuroka and Lu Fei modeled several outfits for Issei, causing him to blush. After Issei bought new clothes for them, they went to the movie theater. When the film ended, they headed to the arcades. The girls showed impressive skill at the dance game, drawing surprised looks from onlookers and achieving a top score. The crowd applauded when they finished. Issei then tried the plush crane game and won 2 stuffed animals, a red dragon for Lu Fei and a black cat for Kuroka. They left the arcades and strolled toward a nearby park. Issei bought 3 ice creams and they sat on a bench, talking about trivial things. The girls described their missions and mentioned that Valley wanted a rematch. Issei spoke vaguely about his own activities, claiming he had been on a secret mission. As night fell, Issei said it was getting late and offered to take them back to where the others were staying. The girls, pouting a little, agreed and they set off. Their path led them down a street lined with motels, and the two women exchanged a look as they considered a plan. They stopped, each leaning close to Issei's ear to say something that left him surprised. Kuroka murmured that they should catch up, and Lu Fei added that it had been too long since they had spent time together. Issei felt a shiver run down his back, but he agreed that they should make the most of the night. Issei told them he would take them somewhere special and assured them it would be a memorable evening. The 3 of them walked toward a 5-star hotel in central Kuo. At the Kuo Hotel, Issei reserved the presidential suite, completed the payment, and received the room keys. They took the elevator to the 15th floor and found room. When they entered the suite, all 3 were impressed by the luxury and space. Issei asked what they thought of the room. Lu Fei smiled and said he had outdone himself. Kuroka activated a sound suppression seal, and the 3 shared a quiet, affectionate evening together, reconnecting and enjoying each other's company. The next morning, Issei returned the 2 women to their former home. He said he would go back to his house to rest. They exchanged warm farewells, and Issei opened a dimensional portal to leave. Back at his house, Issei went straight to his bedroom to sleep before resuming his investigation. A few hours later he woke, changed clothes, prepared a simple meal, and cleaned up. He then returned to his files. He had dossiers on everyone involved except Henrik Larsson. He had not found it necessary to go to Asgard. His conclusion so far was that those involved had died and been revived, but he did not know how they were brought back. He planned to learn their method and trap them. Issei reviewed the footage again and found no new leads. Since their previous attempt to influence the girls had failed, he reasoned that the enemies would try a different approach. His plan became to wait for an attack, study its pattern, and use that information to anticipate and intercept future strikes. Night fell across the world. In Asgard, a figure in red armor with green gems stretched out his hand, gathered energy into a dragon shot, and fired it at a statue of Odin, shattering it. He then formed a communication circle and announced that Phase 2 had been initiated and the Asgard mission completed before disappearing into a magic portal. Minutes later over Grigory, the same armored figure flew above the fallen angel's base. He loosed a dragon shot at a section of the stronghold, destroying part of the structure. The fallen angels cried alarm and fled the area. The figure reported that Phase 2 had been initiated and the Grigory mission completed, then vanished. In Athens, the armored individual approached the Parthenon, charged a dragon shot, and demolished the ancient monument. He declared that Phase 2 had been initiated and that the Olympus mission was complete, then disappeared. Over the demonic territory of Lilith, the armored figure hovered above the demon capital and fired a dragon shot into the public square, devastating part of the area and a nearby block. Demons shouted that they were under attack and rushed to organize a response. The figure announced that Phase 2 had been initiated and the underworld mission completed, then vanished in a magic circle. Hours later in Kuo City, The armored attacker arrived at Kuo Academy and launched a dragon shot at the school gate, obliterating a large portion of the building. The shockwave lit the surrounding streets as alarms blared. The figure recorded that Phase 2 was complete and that they would await Phase 3 before disappearing. A few seconds after the attack, Issei materialized in a magic circle at the academy and saw the destruction. He clenched his fists in anger and cursed that he had arrived too late, then vanished through a portal. Minutes after Issei left, members of the Gremry and Citri clans arrived and stood in stunned silence at the sight. Rias attempted to contact her brother but was suddenly overcome by dizziness and staggered toward the rubble, becoming sick. The same happened to Zenobia and Irina. They were vomiting among the rubble. The Citri clan was alerted. Sona asked Rias if she was all right. Rias answered that she felt dizzy while Kaneko helped her. Kaneko urged Rias to go to the Hayadu residence. Rias asked Sona to call for them, and Sona agreed that she would call and told them to see a doctor. Kuroka and Rosweiss helped Zenobia and Irina. The Gremry girls, accompanied by Kuroka and Lufei, retreated through a magic circle to the Hayadu residence. After they left, the Citri clan with Kiba and Gasper began to sweep the city searching for the enemy. At an unknown location, Lewis reported to the figure on the throne that Phase 2 of the plan was complete. The figure on the throne approved and said this would put the Red Dragon Emperor in danger. Mateus urged the group to finish quickly and begin Phase 3. Kenzo taunted that in Phase 3 there would be no escape. The being on the throne spoke with manic amusement about taking revenge on the Red Dragon Emperor and making him pay for the humiliation he had suffered. After the attacks on the supernatural factions, an emergency meeting of faction leaders convened at Gremry Castle. The atmosphere was tense, everyone was angry and worried because they had believed they had eliminated the supernatural threats and it now seemed that was not entirely true. Present at the meeting were the 4 demon leaders Lucifer, Leviathan, Beelzebub and Asmodeus. Representing heaven were Michael, Gabriel, Uriel, Raphael and Metatron. The fallen angels were represented by Shenhazai, Azazel, Penemu and Baraquil. The yokai faction was represented by its leader Yasaka, speaking for the Japanese deities. The gods Shiva, Odin and Zeus stood for Olympus, having left their children on watch against further attacks. The DXD group was present except for the Gremry girls, Kuroka and Lu Fei, since Sona had reported they were unwell after the attack. Sun Wukong was also absent, tending his territory. Those present included their leader Dulio Gesualdo, representatives of the Citri, Baal, Phoenix and Agar's clans, Kiba and Gasper for the Gremry clan, Vala's group with Vale, Arthur and Biko, the Slash Dog group, Griselda Corda, Vasco Estrada, Elmenhild, Valerie Teeps, and the heroes Chow Chow, Jean, Heracles and Leonardo. The Gremry patriarchs and Grafio were also there, worried about the girls. Everyone noticed the absence of the Red Dragon Emperor and assumed he had prioritized his fiancées, though Yasaka and members of the Citri, Phoenix and Vala's group knew that Issei was not with them. The meeting began with each faction leader describing their attack and showing the damage left by the explosions. What alarmed them most was a message found after the blasts proclaiming that every leader, every faction, every supernatural being would fall and a new era would begin. That threat was in the hands of every faction leader and deepened their concern. Surzex, Azazel, Michael and Yasaka were especially troubled because they recalled that Issei had been investigating something related to future attacks carried out by a group he had been tracking. They had planned to discuss what Issei had been investigating, but Issei asked them not to tell anyone, fearing it could compromise his operation to capture the perpetrators. After hours of intense debate, the meeting agreed that the DXD group would investigate across the human world for clues while each faction conducted inquiries within its own territory. The emergency conference then adjourned and everyone returned to their domains. At the Hayadu residence the girls improved, their dizziness and vomiting subsided, but they developed cravings and began to eat poorly. Rias arrived with a strawberry cake. Asia brought bags of dried fruit and a bottle of juice. Aquino carried bags of sweets and an energy drink. Kaneko brought assorted cream-filled pastries and a carton of milk. Zenobia and Irina arrived with several pizza boxes and 2 bottles of soda. Ravel brought portions of cake and a bottle of juice. Rosweiss contributed mousses and flans. Kuroka brought bags of chips and soufflés along with 2 bottles of soda for Lufei. Feeling better, the girls decided not to visit a doctor, assuming the symptoms had been temporary. In the bathroom, Lufei attended to personal matters and then became concerned when she realized her PRD had not arrived. She worried that this would be the 2nd month without it. Moments later in the dining room, the table was piled with food and drink. The girls exchanged mock-serious looks and jokingly claimed their food as their own, then gratefully thanked each other for the feast. A playful contest began to see who could eat the fastest. They devoured the treats with exaggerated enthusiasm and quickly ended up slumped in their chairs, their stomachs full. Issei's house. Issei had been watching and listening to the leaders' meeting. He thought they would not find anything, felt surprised that the girls were not present, and decided to go to his laboratory. In his laboratory he saw that the body he had been working on was nearing completion, with only a week left until it was finished. He resolved to continue analyzing the attack patterns because something about them felt off and he suspected similar events could occur in the future. Issei planned to take measures to discover where the attackers were hiding and began annotating maps with each struck location while he tried to predict what might happen next. Issei thought for hours and recalled something he had heard during the attack on Quo Academy. A recording from a microphone at the academy entrance and a camera that had caught the attacker from behind had captured the armored stranger announcing that Phase 2 was complete and that Phase 3 would begin. The memory jolted him awake. He went to his laptop, searched every video of the attack, and zoomed in on the silhouette until he noticed something that horrified him. The attacker had been using armor identical to his balance breaker. Analyzing the explosion and the craters in the photos, Issei concluded that the culprit had used a copy of the booster gear and had employed a dragon shot to cause that destruction. He realized that the next step would likely be a staged recording framing him as the one responsible for the attacks, and that realization filled him with dread. He whispered to himself that they would betray him. In Kyoto, Yasaka stood in the courtyard of her mansion, deeply worried for Issei and fearful that something had happened to him. At Surzek's Gremry's office, Surzek sat with Azizel and Michael discussing the brown-haired young man. Azizel expressed concern that what Issei had suggested might be true. Michael warned that the enemy could strike at any moment and that their forces might be larger than those they had faced before. Surzek added that the enemy seemed to possess a way to revive the dead, which would render conventional victories meaningless. They agreed they needed to prepare for the worst. Michael noted that Issei had not been seen, and Surzek suggested Issei was likely investigating the group responsible for the attacks. Michael hoped they had not found him, and Azazel said that losing Issei would be a great blow. The others nodded in agreement. At the Hayadu residence, the Gremry clan along with Sona Citri, Tsubaki, Vale, Baiko, and Arthur gathered in the living room to discuss the faction meeting. Kiba and Gasper recounted everything that had happened at the emergency meeting, which made the girls anxious. Rias learned that Issei had not attended the meeting and felt downcast. Tsubaki comforted Kiba, and Gasper admitted his worry for Issei. Although he had forgiven them before, the girls felt distant from him now and were unsettled by his absence. Valley insisted that Issei would return and that he owed him a rematch. Baiko teased him, and Arthur, flushed with emotion, declared that if Issei did not come back he would personally bring him back and make sure Issei understood why he had upset Lufei. Baiko continued to tease, and Arthur reacted with a bright embarrassment that softened the tension. Sona asked Rias if she was feeling better, and Rias replied that she felt a little improved. Rosweiss reported episodes of dizziness and vomiting, and Asia suggested their distress could be related to worry over Issei. Zenobia mentioned that they had not been eating properly because of their anxiety. Irina voiced concern that Issei might be in danger. Lu Fei and Kuroka tried to reassure everyone, while Irina offered a prayer for Issei that caused some light-hearted groans from the others. Kaneko scolded Irina gently, and Sona recommended they see a doctor to rule out any illness. Rias agreed they would go the following week after exams. After that, the group moved on to lighter, trivial conversation. Back at Issei's laboratory, he worked on a contingency plan in case the factions betrayed him. He sketched strategies for weaponry and infiltration and devised a system of sensors to place in the leaders' castles. These sensors were designed to detect the origin and destination of people using magic circles and portals. He had learned the technique from an ancient magic text and built the devices himself. His plan was to wait for the perpetrators to enter the castles and leave their evidence, allowing him to trace where they had come from and where they were headed. That trail would lead him to the enemy leader's base and to whatever powerful creation the leader relied on so he could neutralize it. If the factions betrayed him, he intended to enact a measured countermeasure. 1 week passed with Issei working nonstop. He installed the sensors in each leader's castle and monitored radio transmissions and cameras for any signs of movement. The girls showed some improvement but took care not to overexert themselves as they recovered. Meanwhile, others around the world were searching for those responsible for the attack. Laboratory. Issei felt the moment of truth had arrived and hoped it would turn out well. He stopped the machine as it drained the water, unlocked the chamber, and opened it. He lifted the body from inside. It was his human clone, and he placed it on a nearby bed. He searched through a book until he found the procedure for separating and releasing beings from a sacred gear and then drew a circle of figures on the floor. After a few moments, Issei recited an incantation, allowed the dragon aura to manifest, and activated the booster gear. When the chant ended, he aligned the clone with his own body and a beam of light enveloped them both. Hours later the light faded, revealing 2 living bodies, one brown-haired and the other a red-haired man of roughly 50. Both collapsed to the floor. Issei whispered that he had succeeded and then lost consciousness. The next morning Issei awakened on the floor, wrapped in a towel. Beside him lay a red-haired man in his clothes. Issei rose, dressed, and began checking the man's vital signs, breathing, pulse, and prepared for the final test to see whether he would awaken and retain his memories. He found clothes and dressed the man using a magic circle. When attempts to rouse him by shaking and splashing water failed, Issei lost patience and grabbed a microphone, turning up a speaker to shout for him to wake, calling him a demed sewer crocodile. The red-haired man, startled awake and clearly irritated, moved to strike Issei but paused as he took in his surroundings and examined his own body. Drake then realized what had happened. He was no longer confined within Issei. Issei, correcting himself from calling him friend to father, excitedly told Drake that he had granted him the freedom he had dreamed of. Drake confirmed that it was true and that he now had a body. He was free. He embraced Issei and both of them wept with joy. Issei said happily that from now on Drake would be able to live a normal life and do as he pleased. Drake replied that life had given him a second chance and he intended to make the most of it. They decided to spend the day getting used to their new bodies by walking around the city. A magic circle swept over them and clothed them in matching outfits: black fabric pants, blue shirts with a red dragon on the front, black leather jackets, and black and white sneakers. Ko City. They spent the day exploring Kuo. Drake wore an aura-suppressing bracelet to avoid detection by supernatural beings. They stopped at a barbershop in the mall. Issei had his hair cut to match the image on the cover they knew. Drake chose a rugged, classic cut reminiscent of action heroes. Passers-by, women blushing as they admired Issei and adults showing interest in Drake made both men laugh. The reactions from other men ranged from envy to respect. Issei noted with amusement that Drake had still retained his charm despite being sealed for millennia, and Drake laughed that Issei had cleaned up nicely as well. The pair enjoyed the attention and joked about being the center of it, causing some onlookers to become flustered. They later went to a bar to celebrate. Night Issei's house. That evening they returned home, ate, and talked. Issei had prepared a bedroom for Drake so he could be comfortable. While Drake showered, Issei finished arranging the room. After Drake's shower, Issei offered him the room and then took a quick shower himself. He grabbed a drink from the fridge and continued his surveillance work in his room while Drake kept him company. They monitored the feeds until late with no significant developments. Asgard Sky Underworld, Kyoto, Olympus, India, Romania. During the night, a magic circle appeared in each mansion of the faction leaders, revealing 8 hooded men. Quietly into each leader's office, left a package on every desk, and withdrew. One of the hooded men announced that Phase 3 was complete and that they would wait for the results before beginning Phase 4, the final stage, which would bring them closer to victory. The next day, Issei reviewed the recordings and found something that pleased him. The enemies had appeared in every faction, leaving a video in each leader's office. He checked the motion sensors on his laptop and, enraged, told Drake that he had found them and intended to put an end to them for ruining his life. Drake asked what was happening. Issei explained calmly but with sadness that he had found the perpetrators and suggested they watch to see how the leaders would react to the evidence. He connected the laptop to the living room television and the two sat on the couch to view the emergency meetings. Castle of Odin Asgard. An emergency meeting of the faction leaders had been called because each of them had received a package containing 2 magical spheres and a note. The note explained that the recording showed the culprit behind the attacks and that, though the leaders would not welcome it, the sender felt duty-bound to inform them. The note labeled the culprit a traitor and urged that he be captured and punished. Odin explained that he had convened the meeting because of the package. Surzex and the other leaders confirmed they had received the same items. Odin energized one of the spheres with magic and projected the image contained within. The projection showed the being responsible for the attacks. Every leader reacted with shock and disbelief when they realized the image matched Issei, the Red Dragon Emperor. The only ones who had doubts were Michael, Azazel, Surzex, and Yasaka. A moment later they put magic on the other sphere, projecting images that disturbed every leader. The projection was a compilation of the Gremory girls' outings with several young men who appeared to be their boyfriends. The footage showed them going out in groups, sending Issei to make contracts so the girls could spend time with those boys, and how Kiba, Gasper, and the Citri clan seemed to be aware of the girls' activities. It showed the girls devoting most of their time to those men, until Issei discovered the situation, confronted them, and left, with the girls following afterward to try to clarify what had happened. Michael, Surzex, Azazel, and Yasaka all believed those were the boys Issei had been investigating. The emergency meeting that followed was tense. After many intense hours of debate, a majority of the faction leaders reached an agreement to sentence the brown-haired Issei to death for treason. Falbium accused him angrily of being a traitor. Shimhazai, equally furious, blamed the girls and called Issei a traitor because of their actions. Surzex, serious, insisted that he did not think Issei had done it. Azazel suggested that Issei might have been set up. Dajuka proposed, reviewing the videos carefully in case they had been altered. Serafal expressed doubt that Issei would betray the alliance for such reasons. Zeus emphasized the need to examine the evidence before making a final decision. Shiva remained neutral while Falbium and Shimhazai continued to blame Issei. Michael, Azazel, and Surzex defended him, arguing that showing the investigations could exonerate him. They urged that he be detained and given a fair trial, since he was a pillar of the factions and must have a reason for his actions that was not simply infidelity. Yasaka listened quietly and thought about what Issei had said to her the night they had been together. Yasaka's memory recalled them lying in bed with Yasaka holding Issei. Issei had confessed that he believed the men he was investigating would make a move that might cause everyone to turn against him. He had spoken sadly that it might be inevitable that they would cast him aside, even Yasaka. Yasaka thought he was imagining the worst and told him she would never leave him, promising to protect him. Issei feared that everyone would agree to kill him and that she would be unable to defend him for reasons she understood better than anyone. Yasaka, serious and hurt by his words, insisted that she loved him and would never betray or abandon him. She then comforted him and they spent the night together, holding each other and finding solace in one another. After the memory, Yasaka argued that she did not believe Issei had acted on his own and that someone else might be behind everything, which angered those who supported the death sentence. Shimhazai accused her of bias because she was in love with Issei and told her to be rational. Shiva intervened, saying they did not know whether Issei was truly responsible and that all they could do was locate him and interrogate him. After more hours of debate, the leaders agreed to arrest Issei and give him a trial so he could defend himself, but not before interrogating his fiancées, as they might be involved in the attacks. The interrogation of the girls was assigned to Serafal Leviathan, Odin, Baraquil, and the Archangel Gabriel. With that, The emergency meeting ended and each faction ordered its subordinates to find the Red Dragon Emperor and bring him in. At Issei's house, Drake was worried for the brown-haired young man after seeing the leaders meeting in Asgard, while Issei remained calm, having expected such a resolution. He knew they intended to sentence him to death, even if a trial came first, and he believed the girls would push for the ultimate punishment. Issei told Drake that he had been betrayed and expected them to hunt for him everywhere. Drake, concerned, promised to defend him until he cleared his name. Issei said that Drake was the only one left for him and that he had lost everything else because of those people. Drake put a hand on his shoulder and reminded him he was not alone. The next day at the Hyedu residence, the four leaders assigned to question Issei's fiancés sat together on a sofa while the girls, still recovering from their recent troubles, faced them. Barakwil explained that the interrogation had been ordered by the faction leaders to find who was responsible for the recent attacks and told the girls to answer truthfully, addressing his own daughter directly. Odin stated that Seraphal Leviathan would carry out the questioning and that the Archangel Gabriel would record their declarations. Seraphal began the questioning, and the girls nodded in response. Seraphal asked where Issei was. Rias responded sadly that they did not know his whereabouts. Seraphal asked how long it had been since they had last seen him. Aquino answered that it had been over a month. Seraphal asked whether Issei had left them, and all of them except Kuroka and Lu Fei grew upset. Asia admitted through tears that he had left them because they had hurt him and lost his trust. Seraphal asked what they had done to make Issei leave. Irina revealed that they had deceived him by becoming involved with other boys. Seraphal demanded to know the specifics with visible anger. Ravel explained that they had been unfaithful with men they had met. Issei had discovered them and left. A few days later he had visited and forgiven them, but he refused to return because his trust had been broken, and since then they had not seen him. Lu Fei and Kuroka denied involvement, supporting each other's statements. Odin expressed disbelief and anger at what the girls had done, especially at Rosweiss. Barakwil remained silent and sorrowful for his daughter, while Gabriel was angered by the girls' actions. Seraphal, attempting to calm the situation, asked how Issei had been the last time they saw him. The girls said he had seemed fine, but after they told him why they had deceived him he appeared hurt and then left, and they had not seen him since. He began to question himself, wondering what he had done wrong to them. During his lamentations he suffered an emotional crisis. He could not stop grieving and injected himself with something he believed was poison, but it was actually medication to calm him. He was not emotionally well, Rosweiss explained tearfully. Kaneko added through her tears that it had been as if he were begging someone for help but had no one to turn to, that he felt utterly alone in the world. Zenobia confessed sadly that because of that they were all unwell and did not seem to recover, and that they felt they deserved the consequences. Seraphal asked the other leaders whether all the information was correct. Odin responded gravely that it was sufficient and that they could reach a rational conclusion with those facts. Gabriel then stated in a serious tone that they needed to withdraw, thanked everyone for their cooperation and time, and asked them to examine the evidence and draw their own conclusions. Barakwil hugged his daughter and told her he was sorry, warning that she would not like what she was about to see and assuring her that he would always be by her side. Aquino thanked her father and said goodbye. A magical circle then appeared and transported the four leaders to Asgard. Sometime later, the girls watched the video of the attack on Crow Academy and were shocked to see Issei identified as the attacker who destroyed the school. The footage and the clips of their past encounters left them stunned and deeply saddened. They realized, with mounting horror, that their earlier testimony had led to a verdict condemning the brown-haired youth. Both Rias and Rosweiss had fainted during the proceedings. Aquino stared blankly, remembered her father's words, and began to cry. She lamented bitterly that she felt responsible, fearing that because of her Issei would be killed. Kaneko held her, also in tears. The others did their best to prevent the situation from worsening. Kuroka and Lu Fei wept as they discussed how to find the young man and hide him from the factions. The four leaders who had overseen the interrogation presented the recorded answers, provoking negative reactions from the other leaders. Surzex showed shame, Azazel and Michael displayed pity, and several others reacted with anger. Falbium angrily accused the youth of seeking revenge and declared him a traitor. Serafal sternly pointed out that the girl's infidelity did not automatically make him a traitor. Penemu, surprising some, warned that his mental state was a serious concern. Odin noted that Issei had forgiven the girls but did not live with them. Gabriel and Surzex expressed doubt that there was any clear motive for Issei to betray the factions, with Michael agreeing that, despite evidence pointing at him, he did not believe Issei was responsible. Azazel suggested the possibility that the videos had been manipulated or that someone else had been disguised in the balance breaker form. Shemhazai, furious, accused the Red Emperor Dragon of treachery and asserted that certain leaders were protecting him for personal reasons, a claim that enraged the assembly. Falbium demanded proof and used a magical display to show scenes from across the supernatural world. The footage depicted demons protesting in their clan plazas and burning items related to the hero in a large bonfire. Demon media circulated the destruction attributed to the brown-haired youth and called for his capture, public trial, and execution. The same public outrage appeared in Asgard, where people gathered outside Odin's castle to demand his arrest. Angels in the heavens were similarly disappointed and were preparing to press their leaders for his detention. Fallen angels in Grigory protested for his execution and for Azazel's exile due to his alleged assistance. In Kyoto, yokai mourned their fallen hero, though some suspected a trap and gathered outside Yasaka's residence. In India, people assembled at Shiva's temple to demand justice. On Olympus, Zeus's children met to petition for the youth's capture and punishment. Faced with the rising unrest, Falbium warned that failure to act could lead to civil war and insisted on arresting the accused to prevent further chaos. With public pressure mounting and few options available to protect him, the leaders agreed to file formal charges of treason. Issei was declared a high-ranking renegade demon, a sizable bounty was placed on his capture, and a communique was sent to all factions labeling the Red Emperor Dragon as the most dangerous criminal among them. Many who knew him felt sorrow for the path he appeared to have chosen, particularly in relation to the Citri, Bale, and Valley incidents. Members of the DXD group were furious with the Gremory clan, blaming their decisions for the downfall of a once great hero. The mission assigned to the factions was to capture Issei at any cost, with authorization to use overwhelming force if necessary to ensure he could be brought before a court. At the Kuo private clinic, the girls sat in the waiting room, anxious for their turn at a medical appointment. They realized what they had been feeling were likely PRDNCY symptoms. The girls were watched by the people in the waiting room, who murmured that they were so young and already PRGNT and that this is how youth is today. The girls heard the murmurs of the crowd and grew angry because they were being judged. After a while, a loudspeaker summoned Rias Gremory to room. Rias stood, nervous, and went to the designated room. The loudspeaker then called Asia Argento to room 20, and Asia rose with visible anxiety and left for her room. Akino Himejima was called to room 17 and went off anxious. Kaneko Tuju was summoned to room 19 and walked to the room frightened by what she might be told. A short time later, Rias returned to the waiting area holding an envelope, serious and silent. The group had agreed to reveal results only after everyone had been seen. The loudspeaker announced Irina Shidu to room 18, and Irina went in nervously and encountered Asia, who held an envelope. Asia later joined the waiting area, sitting quietly with her envelope. Zenobia Cordo was called to room 20 and left anxiously. Aquino arrived in the waiting area with an envelope, serious, and sat beside Rias. Lu Fei Pendragon was called to room 17 and went calmly. Kaneko returned clutching an envelope, sitting beside Kuroka, who tried to soothe her. Ravel Phoenix was called to room 19 and later arrived calm. Soon Irina returned to the waiting area with an envelope and a small smile. Rosweiss Henriksen was called to room 18 and left nervous. Zenobia came back calmly with her envelope. Kuroka Tuju was called to room 20 and left in good spirits. Lu Fei and Ravel returned in turn, each sitting quietly with their envelopes. When everyone had been seen, the group gathered and decided to move somewhere private. They went to the underground parking and Rias drew a magic circle that linked them back to the occult club room at Kuo Academy. At the occult club, the girls skipped classes and sat on the sofas in silence for a moment. Rias asked how everyone had done, smiling faintly as she opened her envelope and looked at her result. Asia covered her face with the paper and, happily, revealed that she was PRNT. Irina expressed joy at also being PRGNT. Kaneko read her result and celebrated the news that she would be having kittens. Zenobia said that she had fulfilled her dream of becoming a mother. Ravel also said she was PRGNT and was happy with the result. Lu Fei announced she was PRGNT with Issei's child and was overjoyed. Kuroka said she had achieved her dream of repopulating her species. Rosweiss shared that she hoped to have a child with Issei. Aquino, smiling, promised that she would give Issei his first child. Rias, with hopeful words, said that she too was PRGNT and trusted that Issei would take responsibility so they could rebuild their family. Those declarations renewed the group's hope. They swore to clear Issei's name and prevent his prosecution. They pledged to do everything possible to protect him, including hiding him outside the factions if necessary and abandoning their faction lives to keep him safe. That oath bound them together to stand by him and help him through the ordeal. At Issei's house he prepared a plan to confront their enemies and clear his name in the supernatural world. He had located the enemy leader's base, gathered his weapons and supplies, and set up 6 papers with magic circles to travel through the underworld and return home when the mission was done. From his radio he learned when the enemy would make their final move. Issei thought their attack would come in a week and resolved to frustrate their plans in a decisive confrontation. Issei spoke to Drake with a serious tone and explained the situation. Drake answered seriously that their opponents would make a move and that the leaders would be unable to act because of the many powers they wielded. Issei replied that they would stop them and that, by doing so, he could clear his name. Drake confirmed that they would move in 2 days, and Issei nodded. The next day. Gremory Castle, Underworld. The Gremory women arrived at the mansion's main room and were received by Rias's parents. Venelana looked sad and said that they all knew something very serious had been done. Rias stated with determination that they had come to make amends. Zeoticus, grave-faced, warned that it would be difficult and that only the person involved could fix it. Rias explained that she had come to speak with them and with her brother and that she had news. Venelana urged them to proceed with concern. Surzex's office. Surzex and his wife Grafia were in the office reviewing papers when Rias and her parents entered with the other girls. Surzex apologized to Rias and said he had not been able to help. Rias told him that it did not matter and that they would do everything possible to help. They only had to find Issei before anyone else did. Zeoticus asked what Rias wanted to say. Rias, nervous, addressed her parents, her brother, and Grafia. Venelana, visibly anxious, pressed Rias to speak, and Rias announced that she was PRNT with Issei's child. The family reacted with astonishment, and Surzex asked if it was true. Rias, smiling, confirmed that a clinic had verified the PRGNCY and that she was 3 months along. Venelana embraced her and congratulated her. Zeoticus hugged his daughter and expressed his happiness at becoming a grandfather again. Surzex, delighted, embraced Rias as well. Grafia added her congratulations and urged Rias to take good care of herself for the sake of the child. After the congratulations, Rias made her request. She told Surzex that she wished for her group to leave their combat organization, explaining that they needed to focus on their pregnancies and on caring for their children and were not in condition to undertake missions. Surzex, surprised but understanding of the need for caution during PRGZY, said he would submit a request to the other leaders and expected it to be accepted so Rias could rest. Rias added that they also needed to help Issei clear his name, but first she needed to find him and tell him the news. Surzex expressed his hope that she would find him. The next day. Issei's house. Issei prepared breakfast and slipped a mild sedative into one of the coffees before carrying the cups to the dining room. He gave one to Drake and drank the other himself. The meal consisted of eggs, ham, cheese, butter, and bread. They ate quietly, and after a while Drake began to feel drowsy and fell asleep on the couch. Issei gently arranged a blanket over him so he would not be cold, then went to his room to change. He changed into tactical clothing, black cargo pants, heavy boots, a black shirt, a bulletproof vest, elbow protectors, a belt with ammunition pouches and a sidearm, black gloves, and a black gas mask. He returned to the living room to look at his father, who lay unconscious. Issei explained aloud that this would be a one-way trip, that he did not want to involve his father, and that he hoped things would be fixed when it was over. He steeled himself, acknowledged that he would be fighting differently and in a weaker state than before, and then completed a magic circle to travel to an unknown location. Issei arrived somewhere he had never seen before. It was night, and after walking a short distance he saw a castle. He loaded 2 pistols with tranquilizer rounds and moved toward the entrance with stealth. 2 guards patrolled the gate. Issei took cover, fired tranquilizer rounds that incapacitated them, and then quietly rendered them unconscious. He proceeded to place trip devices and containment charges at several points around the entrance, arming them to create distractions and block reinforcements. Issei climbed a tall tree nearby, assembled his missile launcher, and loaded it with a special. Werand. Aiming at a window, he fired. The missile struck, shattering the glass and producing a powerful explosion that damaged a section of the castle and sent a shock of light and energy through the compound. Alarmed shouts rose from within the castle, and many of the castle's inhabitants surged toward the entrance. Some of the trip devices detonated as they approached, emitting concussive bursts that dispersed groups of attackers and caused several of them to vanish in flashes of light and drifting black feathers. Taking advantage of the chaos, Issei reloaded and fired another missile at a different wing, producing another blast and scattering more defenders. He then targeted a dense cluster of supernatural foes and fired a third missile that exploded in an airburst. The blast sent many of them flying and made others disintegrate into motes of light and feathers in a dramatic, non-graphic display. With the defenders stunned and disoriented, Issei climbed down and slipped into the castle courtyard, his lack of aura allowing him to remain unnoticed. An unseen pair of charges detonated inside the yard as Issei moved, creating more confusion and neutralizing further opposition without gruesome aftermath. He entered the courtyard and activated the sensors on his gas mask to scan for approaching forces. Finding the area clear, he drew a suppressed rifle fitted with tranquilizer rounds and proceeded inside the castle, moving with quiet, precise steps. Inside the castle, Issei advanced through shadowed corridors, using the silenced rifle and tranquilizer ammunition to incapacitate sentries and smaller groups of attackers. Each shot caused the targets to slump or dissolve into drifting light and feathers rather than leave any graphic traces. He moved methodically deeper into the castle, neutralizing resistance while keeping to the shadows and avoiding direct confrontations where possible. He reloaded and continued his stealthy progress, intent on reaching the heart of the stronghold and finding the person he needed. He saw a fallen angel and fired, the being dissolved into a scatter of black feathers. A few steps later, demons appeared and launched spheres of power at him. Issei barely dodged and returned fire, the attackers vanishing into particles of light. Issei thought grimly that there was little left to finish. A few minutes later he came to the entrance of a hall. Through his mask he counted 8 silhouettes and concluded they were waiting for him. Issei assumed they were inside that room. He stored his rifle in a portal, took out 2 grenades and removed the hook from one. He threw it at the hall door, shattering the entrance. Without wasting time, he pulled the hook from the other grenade and tossed it inside while evading several dragon shot attacks. Inside the hall, the grenade detonated and released a thick white gas that obscured the 8 figures. Issei produced 2 pistols and fired sedative rounds, hitting them and rendering them immobile. When the smoke cleared, a brown-haired man was removing a gas mask, and the 8 figures were the boys who had been impersonating him. Their fiancés had betrayed him. Issei observed with a serious tone that he had not expected such rubbish to be his imitators. Louis, still paralyzed, growled that they had been discovered. Issei calmly noted that it had been obvious. They had been dead and revived by something or someone. Henrik arrogantly insisted that even if they had been found out, fate could not be reversed. Kenzo mocked him, wanting to see him killed by those who had supposedly loved him. Issei said he wanted to know who their master was and what their goal was, and the others laughed. Zafquil taunted that their master was an enemy Issei had defeated long ago and who now sought revenge. Anselmo declared that their goal was to eliminate the faction leaders, the people who had betrayed Issei. Vincenzo added that the aim was to bring the world under one ruler. Mattheus sneered that it was pointless to stop them because they would kill Issei anyway. Kenji laughed that even if they were killed now, they would revive again. Louis said they had taken from Issei everything he loved. Mattheus told him he was alone, with no help and no one, not even his parents, on his side. Kenzo mocked that if the boys were killed, they would revive and seize the girls again. Issei replied with a cold, taunting tone that he had discovered a way to destroy them definitively. The others shouted in disbelief. Issei explained that there was a method to annihilate both body and soul, and he intended to test it on them. He recited with grim amusement that he who laughs last laughs best, then activated a time device set for 30 seconds. The boys panicked, shouting that they could not disappear and could not move. Issei ran out of the hall, pulled a shotgun from a portal and fired at incoming creatures, neutralizing several of them. When the 30 seconds elapsed, the device detonated. It released a charged blue mist that enveloped the boys. They cried out as the mist engulfed them, and one by one their forms dissolved into particles of light until none remained. Elsewhere in the castle, the brown-haired Issei climbed the stairs, reloading his shotgun between confrontations and neutralizing the creatures inside. He put his gas mask back on and began tracking where the leader might be, moving upward toward the top floor and searching every room. When a vampire approached, he shot it and its form dispersed into light. Issei thought there was one room left to check and that the leader should be there unless he had fled. This one would not run from a fight. He kept the shotgun in a portal, took 2 grenades and a small cube, activated the cube, removed the hook from one grenade and threw it at a door, destroying the entrance. He then hooked the second grenade and tossed it inside. It detonated with a blinding flash of light. Seizing the moment, he lobbed the cube into the room and entered, seeing a throne and someone waiting there. From the throne, Ryzavim glared and sneered with hatred at the Red Dragon Emperor. Issei answered with a serious tone that yes, he had survived. Ryzavim laughed and scoffed that it was absurd for inferior beings to have killed him. Issei, voice edged with anger, accused Ryzavim of sending his lackeys to ruin his life, and said that their betrayal had shown him what truly mattered. Ryzavim taunted that the women who had sworn eternal love had left him for Ryzavim's servants, that he was useless, betrayed by everyone and alone. Issei conceded he might be alone, but declared that he no longer depended on anyone to be strong, pointing out that he had just dealt with Ryzavim's lackeys. Ryzavim cursed and launched a bolt of power at Issei, who barely evaded it and moved toward the cube. Ryzavim attempted to use power to cancel sacred gears, but it had no effect on Issei, which made the leader desperate. Issei took the cube and dodged Ryzavim's attacks. He pulled 2 bombs from a portal and prepared to act. Issei dodged another attack from Ryzavim and threw a bomb at him. Ryzavim taunted that it was all he had, but a bomb of sacred energy struck him. He screamed and covered his eyes as a tear gas device hit him, making it hard to breathe. Coughing and furious, he was then hit by a paralyzing shot that left him unable to move. Issei approached, helped Ryzavim to the throne, and set a mysterious cube at his feet. Issei warned Ryzavim angrily while producing a paper inscribed with a magic circle. He accused Ryzavim of thinking he had won the battle and threatened that, although Ryzavim might have won that day, Issei would win the war and finish them one by one. After delivering a short, ruthless barrage, Issei channeled magic into the paper and issued the command to trigger it. He activated the cube and vanished through a magic circle, unleashing a massive blast that neutralized Ryzavim and the attackers in the hall and leveled the castle across a wide radius. The magnitude of the explosion sent tremors through parts of the underworld and drew the attention of many inhabitants. At Gremry Castle, a magic circle opened in Surzek's study and Issei appeared in battle gear. Surzek, leader of the Lucifers, was startled at first but recognized him. Issei announced that he had come to surrender, provided he would receive a fair trial. Surzek agreed and summoned the faction leaders. Moments later, all faction leaders arrived and found Issei wearing military attire and a gas mask, which surprised them. Asmodeus ordered the guards to seize the traitor, and the guards handcuffed Issei. Shemhazai denounced him as a traitor. Sera expressed concern and wondered whether he had anything left to defend himself with. Ajuka Beelzebub instructed the preparations for the trial chamber and ordered others to be called. 1 hour later, the demonic court of justice in Lilith convened, and the trial was broadcast to all supernatural factions. Present in the chamber were the faction leaders and the DXD group, except for the Gremry girls, Kuroka, and Lufei, who remained at the Hyudu residence. Reactions among the audience ranged from disappointment to pity from those who had once been Issei's friends. Issei presented recordings of the attacks and evidence of how he had apprehended the culprits, but the judges refused to accept his evidence and found him guilty. The sentence stripped him of his demonic status, revoked ownership of the Red Dragon Emperor, annulled his existing commitments, and ordered his execution. In the public square of Lilith, preparations for the execution proceeded. Beelzebub oversaw the extraction of the pawn pieces embedded in Issei's body. The pieces were removed from his arms, legs, and torso, leaving him weakened and marked. The sacred gear was then taken from him via a glowing red circle. Once unbound, the condemned man remained standing, and everyone expected him to collapse, but nothing happened. Issei opened a portal in his back, retrieved a paper inscribed with a magic circle, removed his gas mask, and addressed the crowd calmly. He accused the factions of being traitors by nature but said he harbored no hatred and wished no ill upon them. He declared that he no longer belonged to any faction and asked them to forget him, warning that if they ever sought his help he would turn away. With that final defiant statement, he activated the magic paper and slipped away. Asmodeus raged that the man had escaped. The onlookers noticed the sacred gear beginning to flicker. Before they could react, it unleashed a violent blast that left many leaders and onlookers gravely injured. Viewers watching the trial could scarcely believe what had happened. The day became a lasting humiliation for the supernatural factions, a memory they would not forget. Back at his house, Issei hurried to his room, changed clothes, and inspected the torn pouches stained where the pawn pieces had been removed. He thought the plan had gone as intended, took a quick shower, dressed, and went to his laboratory. He set up a camera to record messages in case his location was discovered and wired several defensive devices in the house as contingencies. He left a small sphere with a farewell note in Drake's room and allowed himself a moment of sorrow as memories of their shared time surfaced. Issei spoke quietly to the memory of his father, asking only for happiness and for the protection of those who truly cared. After a PRD of bitter crying and then composure, he packed clothing into a pocket dimension, collected his helmet, wallet, and documents, and prepared his motorcycle a KTM 390 in orange, white, and black. He started the bike, rode onto the street, and cast a final glance back at the house before accelerating away. Cruising through Kuo, Issei reached a corner in the town center and lifted his visor slightly. A group of girls emerged from a nearby shop and noticed a stopped motorcycle with its rider looking in their direction. They looked closely and recognized him as Issei. They were about to approach, but the traffic light turned green and the brown-haired man rode his motorcycle toward the outskirts of the city. The girls called for Issei with sadness because they would not be able to tell him the news, not knowing it was the last time they would see the brown-haired man in the city and probably ever. The brown-haired man was outside the city riding his motorcycle. He bid farewell to Kuo, to Issei Hyudu, and to the life he had known as he left for another city to escape. This was Issei's first escape, although he would run away several more times in the future and eventually face the consequences. Elsewhere, a prisoner sat with his face covered by a black bag, handcuffed and flanked by 2 soldiers, one on each side to prevent any attempt to flee. The prisoner was the former Red Dragon Emperor, a once celebrated hero of the factions and former leader of many followers, who had become the notorious criminal known as Magic Issei. At that moment he was on his way to his trial and memories stirred in his mind. Issei recalled with a wry amusement the time he had humiliated them before all the supernatural beings and how he had wanted to see their faces but had fled before he could. After that escape, many things had happened, he remembered, and he began to think again. Memory somewhere in Japan. Hours had passed since Issei left Kuo. He was riding his motorcycle at high speed along the highway toward an uncertain destination. He told himself he had to hurry before they found him and that he needed to reach that place as soon as possible to get away. He remembered how humiliating his action had been for them. A mere human had managed to defeat all the leaders in front of everyone with a single strike. He blamed them for not believing him, and he worried about his father and the people who cared for him. Lilith City Underworld. All the leaders, the DXD group, and several beings were gathered, tended by demons using phoenix tears to heal them. A group of figures discussed what had happened. Valley was surprised that his rival would do such a thing. Serorg expressed anger and disbelief at being humiliated in front of everyone. Biko laughed that Issei had done what no one else could, toppling them and even the leaders, which only further enraged the others. Arthur ordered Biko to be quiet and declared Issei a confirmed traitor. Saji spoke sadly that Issei was now their enemy. Yura angrily blamed the women for what had happened. Sona, solemn and incredulous, said Issei must be eliminated. Elmenhild agreed that, if not for those women, Issei would not be in this situation, which provoked further anger. Chow Chow commented seriously that, because of the girl's whims, a great hero had fallen and a dangerous enemy had arisen. Jean noted that Issei had done what the Chaos Brigade could not, even against powerful beings, and Heracles and Leonardo nodded in agreement. Razor worried about how his sister would react to the news, and members of his clan moved to comfort him. Arthur was troubled by the prospect of explaining everything to Lu Fei. Vasco and Dulio expressed sorrow and disappointment at Issei's fall. Griselda accused him of lying to them to hide the Chaos Brigade's supposed resurgence, stirring more outrage among the group. Sikvera acknowledged that Issei's arguments had some substance, while Sona wondered how the girls would react when they learned the truth. Among the leaders, Asmodeus roared that the man was a traitor who had shown his true intentions and humiliated them before all the supernatural beings. Shemhazai supported the anger, saying Issei had wanted to destroy them. Leviathan could not believe it and was deeply saddened. Penemu remarked on the shock that a human had defeated them so completely. Beelzebub, curious and serious, wondered how Issei had managed to create that bomb. Yasaka sat silently crying, convinced that the boy's words had been fulfilled and that he had likely struck at the enemy while wearing a battle uniform. Zeus expressed disappointment, Shiva agreed sadly, and Gabriel noted that Issei's final words had conveyed sadness and disillusionment in his eyes. Metatron bluntly labeled him a traitor, with Uriel and Raphael concurring. Azazel announced they would notify Issei's former fiancés of the court's verdict. Surzex and Michael agreed to accompany him. Odin, still incredulous, said there would be an emergency meeting in a few hours about the case. Surzex then opened a magic circle to transport them to the Hyadu residence. A short time later. Hyadu residence. The girls were gathered on the living room sofas, all distressed after seeing Issei leave the city. Kaneko noticed that Issei had looked sad. Kuroka also had picked up the same impression. Before Rias could finish her thought, a magic circle appeared in the room and Surzex, Michael, and Azazel emerged, their expressions somber. Rias asked what was wrong. Azazel began by asking if anyone had seen Issei. Rosweiss replied sadly that they had seen him leave the city on a motorcycle, which alarmed the leaders. Surzex then revealed the tragedy. Issei had been tried for betrayal against the factions. He had presented evidence to defend himself and clear his name, but no one believed him and he was convicted. The sentence had been carried out. In an ungraphic, ritualized procedure familiar in that world, the authorities stripped him of his rank and removed the sacred gear that bound him to the Gremory clan, leaving him separated from the supernatural elements that defined him. The girls were shocked and began to cry. Surzex reported that, after the removal, they had expected him to die, but he had remained standing. Issei had called them traitors, vowed never to return, and then escaped. Surzex handed his sister an envelope and an orb as proof. Michael then advised the girls to leave the Hyadu residence. He warned that others would try to use them to trap Issei and that they could be endangered because of the betrayal. A tense silence followed as they absorbed the warning. Michael spoke sadly, his words casting fear over the girls. Azazel spoke next with a heavy heart, explaining that the other leaders and supernatural factions had branded Issei a traitor and that the situation had become dangerous for them. They had to leave for their own safety. Surzek spoke seriously and handed Rias a bank card, saying he would provide funds so they could live in peace. Azazel presented power-suppressing bracelets to the girls and urged them to take them. Michael offered a solemn wish for their well-being and for them to find Issei. Azazel added that they had to attend a meeting and wished the girls luck, hoping everything would be resolved. Surzek said tearfully goodbye to his sister, wishing her happiness and asking her to care for his nephew. A magic circle then appeared and transported them to the underworld. Minutes passed as the girls tried to process everything Surzek, Azazel, and Michael had said. Rias came out of her trance, opened an envelope, and read the underworld tribunal's verdict aloud. She explained that the ruling annulled the girls' engagement to Issei, called for the removal of the Red Dragon Emperor piece, imposed a death sentence, and ordered the erasure of all traces belonging to Issei Hayadu. The girls understood now what the leaders had meant. They were being pushed to flee because otherwise they would be captured, used as bait to trap Issei, forced into alliances with other factions, and possibly handed over to those who wanted them executed. Rosweiss took a magical sphere, charged it, and projected a recording into the room. The girls watched as the footage showed Issei being handed over to Surzek, wearing clothing that looked like a soldier's uniform. They saw guards detain him, saw his trial, and watched as he presented evidence in his defense. The evidence revealed that his exes had been involved in the incidents that led to his being accused, and the girls exchanged stunned, disbelieving looks when the recordings and audio played. The judges and some leaders had not believed him, and he was declared guilty and given a sentence. On a public square in the recording, they watched the removal of his sacred gear. Despite the extraction, Issei remained standing and resolute. The recording ended with Issei's final words before he fled, echoing in their minds. The sacred gear then flashed and exploded, bringing the footage to a close. When the projection ended, the girls were weeping and blaming themselves for what had befallen Issei. Rias lamented that it was all her fault, and Aquino held her as she cried. Lu Fei realized Issei must have been fleeing from them on the motorcycle. Kuroka acknowledged that finding him would be difficult. Rosweiss observed that although he had become a dragon, he was probably concealing his essence to avoid detection. Zenobia, having cried, urged everyone to hurry and pack, while Irina insisted they set aside their mourning and escape as quickly as possible. The girls agreed and each went to her room to gather their belongings. Somewhere unknown, Rizavim stood with two hooded men and felt a sudden pain wash over him. He roared in fury at having his plans thwarted again. The hooded men taunted him, which only increased his anger. Rizavim raged that Issei had been betrayed by the factions and was now on the run, and he vowed to have him captured and make him pay for the humiliations he had suffered. The hooded men cautioned him to stay focused on their shared objective. In Japan, Issei arrived at a gas station to refuel his motorcycle after hours on the road. He used a white card at the self-service pump to unlock the nozzle and began filling the tank. Inside the shop, someone made a call to the police. When a patrol car arrived, two officers confronted him and ordered him to raise his hands. As one officer moved to handcuff him, Issei headbutted him and incapacitated him. The other officer fired his weapon. Issei used the first officer as a brief shield and was struck in the leg. He then took down the remaining officer and rushed into the shop. The attendant inside fired and hit Issei in the leg as well. Grunting in pain, Issei discarded the attendant's weapon and left the scene. Despite his wounds, Issei started his motorcycle and sped away along the highway. As he rode, his stomach growled from hunger. He thought he would have to try to find an inn if he could, and after some time he spotted a roadside inn with several trucks parked outside. He slowed down and slipped into the parking lot, concealing his motorcycle. At the inn, the brown-haired man entered and found the place rustic. Several truckers were talking, and he settled at a table, placing his helmet aside. A brown-haired waitress with green eyes, of average build and wearing black pants and a red shirt, approached with a pencil and pad to take his order. The waitress asked for his order. The brown-haired man asked for a seafood consommé, a plate of spicy rustic mashed potatoes with a pork chop, a lettuce and tomato salad, and a beer to drink. The waitress wrote the order and carried the note to the kitchen. At Issei's house in Kuo, the redhead woke and realized he had been sleeping on the couch. The redhead Drake called out for Issei and, finding no answer, searched the laboratory and bedroom. He could not find Issei and began to worry when he noticed several of Issei's belongings were missing. Drake paced in mounting concern and went into Issei's bedroom, where he found a note and a small sphere. He picked up the letter, sat down and read. Issei's letter explained that he had left the house. He had been unable to fulfill their promise to finish off their enemy together. He left to protect Drake because the factions wanted to capture Drake and exploit his power. Issei wrote that he had given them proof to clear his name but had not been believed, so he had to escape. He was leaving Japan with no fixed destination and no one to rely on. He hoped Drake would be well and happy, and he said he had left money so Drake could live comfortably after the humiliations he had suffered. Issei told Drake not to worry about him, warned that many were hunting him and that a reward would likely be offered for his capture. As a final request, Issei asked Drake to look after the women he loved. He explained that he had left a sphere containing all his memories and that there were recordings in a chamber for the women and the factions. He closed the letter as a last goodbye and signed it with affection. After reading, Drake began to cry. He had lost the person he cared for most. He had loved Issei like a son, and now the brown-haired man's chances of survival seemed smaller. Drake remembered Issei's sacrifice to free him from the sacred gear. Issei had transferred his soul into a human body he had created, and Drake was left in the body made by the two dragon gods. Drake steadied himself, channeled magic into the sphere, and projected Issei's memories. The memories showed Issei's journey at the Rise of Him base and his precise, decisive battles against supernatural foes presented in a dynamic, action-filled sequence. The scenes were intense but non-graphic, showing swift strikes and dramatic takedowns rather than gore. Drake felt a bittersweet satisfaction watching Issei take down those who had ruined his life with experiments. He was surprised to see the group's leader, Rise of Him, appear, but recognized that the figure was a clone. He was glad Issei neutralized him without resorting to his final, devastating power. The projection then showed Issei surrendering to the factions, the trial, and Drake's anger at their betrayal when they stripped Issei of the sacred gear. Drake realized that the sacred gear had been Issei's final gift to the factions and that Issei had humiliated their leaders even as they betrayed him. Pride welled in Drake at how Issei had stood his ground. The memories concluded with Issei instructing Drake to abandon the house, to take his discoveries and books, and warning that the residence was rigged with traps set to trigger should the leaders discover its location. After the projection ended, Drake stored the sphere and wasted no time packing his belongings. He intended to leave immediately and search for Issei in the future. At the Gremry Castle in the underworld, the faction leaders held a heated meeting, arguing over what to do with the man who had humiliated them publicly. Asmodeus shouted that they had to capture that man. Metatron suggested offering a strong incentive to ensure a quick capture. Shemhazai proposed that whoever captured him be elevated to the position of pillar of the factions, drawing the attention of all present. Odin insisted that the captor should have unrestricted access to every territory without having to request permission. Beelzebub added that the captor should be promoted to a supreme-class demon and granted a territory in the underworld. Penemu recommended allowing the captor to make a reasonable wish. Leviathan expressed agreement. They reached an agreement to offer a grand reward to whoever captured Issei Hayadu, the former Red Dragon Emperor. The reward would include elevation to supreme-class demon with territory in the underworld, appointment as the new pillar of the factions with a seat among the leadership, and unrestricted access to all alliance territories without needing authorization. In addition to offering VIP treatment, the leaders promised a wish within reasonable limits and a reward in money, jewels, and gold. The announcement was broadcast across all supernatural channels, drawing widespread attention. No faction had ever offered such a reward for a human before. They published the brown-haired man's details alongside a current photograph. The announcement listed his name as Issei Hayadu, age 18, residence Kuo, Japan. His listed races were human, formerly demon, and formerly humanoid dragon. His criminal ranking was given as SSSSSSSSSS+. The comment warned that he was a public danger and a major threat to the factions, capable of even taking down leaders, and advised anyone who saw him to flee and notify the leaders. He was described as emotionally unstable and capable of destroying whatever he set his mind to. The publication stunned the supernatural community, including the members of the DXD group. The report labeled Issei as the most dangerous being in the faction's history, surpassing figures such as Rizavim, Kokabil, and the Norse god Loki. Those leaders who still defended him were shaken and helpless, consumed by sorrow at their inability to protect him. Issei's former teammates in DXD were already planning how to capture him, regarding one another as deadly rivals now that the reward was so great. After the information was released, the leaders' meeting was adjourned and everyone returned to their respective homes. Kyoto, Japan. A magical circle appeared as the yokai faction leader arrived, her expression heavy with grief. Kunu came to see her mother. Yasaka, the elder kitsune, apologized bitterly and said she could not do anything. Kunu comforted her daughter and told her that it was not her fault. Yasaka, still crying, reminded Kunu that she had promised Issei protection and had failed. Kunu expressed hope that Issei was safe, wherever he might be, and that no one would find him. Somewhere else in Japan an inn. Issei had finished his meal and paid his bill. As he stepped outside, a sudden magical barrier activated and 5 renegade-looking demons materialized. One of the demons sneered that they had found the most wanted person according to the leaders. Another mocked that he was no longer the Red Dragon Emperor but just a filthy human. A third declared that they intended to take him to their leader. Issei refused emphatically and demanded they go away. The leader of the group suggested it might be better to kill him so their leader could revive and use him. Issei answered that they would see about that, his tone cutting through their laughter. The demons scoffed at the idea that a mere human could be a threat. Issei warned them not to underestimate humans, that they could be surprising. The 4th demon ordered Issei to come quietly or be taken by force. Issei replied that he would not go without making them defeat him first. At that moment a magic circle ran across his body and his clothing shifted into battle gear. He now wore black military pants with multiple pockets, black combat boots, a long-sleeved black shirt, black elbow pads, and a thick black bulletproof vest that covered his torso and back like armor. The confrontation escalated into a fast-paced, anime-style clash. The demons attacked aggressively, launching coordinated moves to overwhelm him. Issei moved fluidly, dodging and countering with precise, non-lethal strikes that focused on disabling rather than maiming. The scene unfolded like a choreographed duel, with flashes of light from magic and the impact of blows sending shockwaves through the inn's courtyard. The demons were pushed back by Issei's skill and resolve, stumbling and regrouping under his steady pressure. As the battle progressed, the demons realized he was not the easy target they had expected. Issei continued to defend himself with controlled force until the encounter reached a tense stalemate. Then, having created an opening, he withdrew from the scene and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. A brief moment of quiet followed as the demons recovered and reconsidered their orders. His face was covered by a gas mask that enveloped his head, leaving only his eyes visible behind protective lenses. From a portal he produced 2 grenades. 5 demons immediately attacked him with magic and spheres of energy, forcing him to dodge and take cover in one of the parked trucks. One demon shouted that he had gone and began searching for the brown-haired man. The brown-haired man pulled the pin from a grenade and threw it toward the demons. It detonated in a bright flash that made them shield their eyes. He slipped onto the trailer of a nearby dump truck, lifted the cargo curtain slightly, and slipped inside, leaving a gap. From the portal he drew an M16 rifle, loaded it with special rounds, and prepared to fire. Another demon spoke angrily, demanding to know where their quarry was, and a third noted that the barrier was still active, so the target had to be nearby. The 5th demon suggested they split up, and the others agreed. 2 demons searched the sky while the other 3 combed the ground. One airborne demon appeared in the rifle's sight. The brown-haired man fired with unerring precision, and the demon shattered into particles of light with a final scream. The other airborne demon rushed to his fallen comrade and was met the same way, collapsing into particles of light after a cry. The remaining 3 demons hurried over and spotted something near a truck. They circled the vehicle and charged a powerful magical attack, unleashing it on the dump truck and causing a massive explosion. The 3 demons declared they had succeeded in eliminating their target and argued that a mere human could not have survived, suggesting they report back to their leader. They did not notice a missile approaching. The missile struck where the demons stood, touching down and exploding in a huge blast that destroyed several trucks and the inn. The demons screamed before dispersing into particles of light. When the smoke cleared, Issei emerged from the highway and made his way toward the ruined inn. He noted that he had won again, but that his supplies were running low and he needed to leave quickly before more enemies arrived. He stowed the missile launcher back into the portal and used a small magic circle to change out of his gear into casual clothes. After a few seconds, the magical barrier snapped. Without wasting time, Issei started a motorcycle, put on his helmet, and sped away along the highway in an unknown direction. A few minutes later, the Citri clan appeared outside the inn by way of a magic circle. Tsubaki observed in a serious tone that the energy had been felt here. Saji noted that there had been 5 demons and then their power had vanished. Tsubaki concluded that a battle must have taken place and that the demons had been eliminated. Sona said there was a high probability that Issei had taken them out. The clan members thought in near unison that Issei was dangerous. Yura silently hoped that Issei could escape and that the situation would be clarified. Sona activated a magic circle and teleported the whole clan away. Near Tokyo, Issei rode his motorcycle at high speed. A road sign showed 12 kilometers to the city, and he began planning his next move. He hoped he would not be found here. After the confrontation with the demons, he had sensed the Citri clan arrive and was relieved he had left in time, or they would have found him and alerted their leaders. He also worried that the police had issued a warrant in his name and that he needed to rendezvous with an associate to collect items before leaving. He exited the highway onto a road that led into Tokyo. After a day and a half of travel, Issei arrived in the city, having rested enough along the way. He reached Tokyo at dusk and headed toward the center, arriving at an elegant bar. Inside, he approached the bar counter where a bartender was serving customers. The bartender asked what he would like. Issei ordered a monkey's tail, a coded request that the bartender took seriously. The bartender indicated that the person he meant sat in the VIP area at the back and wore a red hat. Issei thanked him and walked to the VIP section. At one table, a well-dressed man in a red hat recognized him and greeted him by name, offering a handshake. Issei responded that things had become complicated and that he was being pursued. The man said it had been expected and that he already had Issei's package. The man produced a briefcase, opened it, and took out documents and a set of stamps. He explained that the documents were a forged passport and visa for Issei, and that he had prepared 5 additional identities in case Issei was discovered. Issei examined the papers and saw the different names laid out. The man continued that the stamps were travel tickets for maritime routes and that, with them, Issei could travel on various ships. He advised a recommended sea route to follow before reaching the final destination and handed over a map showing the ports. The man explained that the ship would depart at 10:30 p.m. from Tokyo port and that Issei needed to take the Maersk. The serious man handed over the information about a container at the port that held the weapons and ammunition that Issei had ordered. Issei examined the stamps and the map and allowed himself a small smile. Issei asked how long it would take to get there. The serious man replied that it would take 3 months if he followed the route. Issei nodded in agreement and said he would now deliver his part. He produced a briefcase from a portal. Issei opened the briefcase and took out 2 SSD drives, handing them to the man. The man inspected the drives closely and brought a laptop to examine their contents. Issei explained that the drives contained all the proof that supernatural beings existed and the atrocities they committed against humanity. He added that his research and results were included, along with a method to defeat them with a weapon. He also said there was malware to infiltrate the documents and discoveries of the fallen angels, as well as another program to siphon resources from supernatural entities. The man looked astonished at the amount of information. The man asked how Issei had obtained all of it. Issei responded with bitter calm that he had once been one of them, that he knew them perfectly, and that he had been the pillar of those traitors. He said he hoped the underworld could make use of the material. The man thanked him for the information, called it valuable, and wished him luck on his journey. Issei replied that he would need it, shook the man's hand, and left the bar. He reflected that he had given only a small portion of his research and thought the man an idiot for not recognizing its full value. 2100 hours, Tokyo port. Issei arrived at the port on his motorcycle and stored it in a pocket dimension. He presented credentials to the guard at the entrance. The guard validated them and allowed him in. Inside the port, cranes and heavy machinery moved containers along the docks, loading and unloading ships and trucks. Issei searched for the vessel that would take him elsewhere and found it at the quay. It was enormous. He checked his phone and saw it was 21:45, 45 minutes before departure. He looked for a place to sit. A barrier suddenly activated, the night sky shifting to an eerie green. Moments later a magic circle appeared and a group emerged, the Citri clan. Issei froze, surprised. He had believed he had left no trail and had taken long routes to avoid detection. Sona ordered Issei to surrender and come with them willingly. Tsubaki declared that Issei was human and had no escape. Issei acknowledged that they had found him and admitted he had underestimated them. Sona repeated their demand to come peacefully or be taken by force. Saji arrogantly announced that they would prove their clan's superiority by bringing Issei's head to the leaders. Issei responded with biting irony, implying they sought the reward for themselves, which angered Saji and his companions. Yura watched with sadness while the rest of the clan accused Issei of betrayal. Tsubaki summoned her Naginata, Bennia drew a scythe, Tomo drew a sword, Saji activated his sacred gear, and Lu shifted into a wolf. The others changed into battle attire. Sona ordered the final warning: surrender or they would finish him. She then commanded the clan to take him down. They launched forward. Saji used a lariat to try to ensnare Issei. Issei barely dodged. Tsubaki hurled her Naginata toward his neck, and Issei dove to the ground to evade it, his hair brushing the blade as it passed. Lu, Tomo, and Ruruko rushed in to strike, but Issei acted a small shield of magic and was propelled backward toward a stack of drums, managing to break and stop before colliding. A short neutral moment followed as both sides reassessed their positions. At that moment Yura arrived and struck the brown-haired man, who covered his face with his arms and was sent flying into a shipping container, collapsing to the ground. He thought that had hurt, and barely dodged a magical attack from Momo and Rhea. The brown-haired man found himself surrounded by the Citri clan with nowhere to run, and he decided to act. He thought he was surrounded and would have to use a trick, drawing 2 grenades from a dimensional pocket. Sona arrogantly declared that resistance was useless and demanded his surrender. Tsubaki taunted that he was just a normal human who could not defeat them. Saji mocked that without Drake he was nothing. Issei warned them not to underestimate humans, then pulled the pin from one grenade and made it explode, sending a beam of light outward. The brown-haired man did not waste time. He pulled the pin from the other grenade and threw it towards Sona, causing a bright blast. Sona could not protect herself and was thrown toward the sea by the impact. The others shouted for their president in alarm, but the brown-haired man used the flash of light to escape and disappeared into a cluster of nearby containers. Once hidden, he used healing magic to mend his wounds. Recovered, he invoked a magic circle and changed from casual clothes into his battle attire. By the time the Citri clan regained their vision, they had pulled Sona from the water and brought her back to the dock. Sona raged at being bested. Yura reported seriously and with concern that he had escaped. Sona, furious, ordered them to go and bring him back immediately. The clan split up to search the entire port. Issei worked out a strategy to defeat the Citri clan without killing them. He reasoned that if they were separated he would have a better chance, because together they were dangerous and Sona was the best strategist after the leaders. He readied a silenced pistol loaded with paralyzing rounds. The Citri clan had split into 4 groups. Sona and Tsubaki searched near the pier. Momo, Ruruko, and Saji searched the north side of the container depot. Tomo and Rhea scoured the south side near the truck parking. Bennia and Lu searched the port entrance. Yura searched alone among another set of containers, looking troubled. Because he was human and had no aura, the demons could not detect Issei unless he used magic. He climbed a stack of 7 containers to get a full view of the port and moved by leaping from stack to stack until he spotted the couple he was looking for. Issei positioned himself and waited for the right shot. When Saji came into view, Issei took aim at his head and fired. The round rendered Saji unconscious, effectively putting his brain to sleep and leaving his body immobile. The girls were stunned and noticed a silhouette on top of the containers. Momo called out that she had found him and could not believe he had defeated Saji. Ruruko informed Sona angrily that they had found the man and had neutralized her boyfriend. Issei settled in to wait for Momo. When she appeared near his stack and unleashed a magical attack, she believed she had the advantage, not realizing he had moved to another stack. Issei fired a paralyzing shot that struck her midsection and halted her movements. She collapsed onto the containers. Issei then used the butt of his pistol to render her unconscious. He stowed the pistol, drew a shotgun, and bounded across the stacks toward the south side. Sona exploded in fury at his escape, and Tsubaki remained grim and determined. Issei reached the south area and found 2 Citri clan members there, Tomo and Rhea, searching for him. He did not waste time and climbed down from the lot, moving to a safe distance. Rhea and Tomo roared that they would finish him as they lunged to attack Issei. Issei coldly declared checkmate, then fired and struck Rhea in the torso, knocking her unconscious. Tomo screamed that he would pay, swung a descending cut, and Issei managed to dodge by jumping back. Taking advantage of her lowered guard, he fired at her right side and left her unconscious. The gunshots drew other demons toward the southern part of the port. Issei put away the shotgun and produced an M16. He saluted, approaching with Ben-Nia and fired at Lu's torso, leaving the werewolf stunned. Ben-Nia rushed to help, and in that moment Issei shot her in the back and immobilized her. He then struck both of them on the head with his rifle, rendering them unconscious. Issei barely dodged a rushing water dragon attack aimed at him. Tsubaki charged next, cutting with her naginata. Issei narrowly avoided the strikes. He drew a knife and threw it, hitting an attacker in the arm and causing the Citri queen to fall. Ruruko and Yura tried close-quarters attacks, but Issei evaded both and fired at Ruruko's back, immobilizing her. Sona erupted in fury and unleashed a massive water dragon that struck Issei full force, sending him flying into shipping containers and crashing to the ground. He tried to get up but was dazed and could not. Yura watched sadly, then helped Tsubaki to her feet. Tsubaki, wincing from the pain, explained that the blade had holy water on its edge, which surprised Yura. Sona taunted that no mere human could defeat her, declaring that she would become a supreme-class demon. She began charging magic into her feet and rained kicks down on the fallen Issei. He struggled to endure the blows and tried to reach his pistol. Sona ranted about being the great Sona Citri and turned to look at her clan. Issei seized the moment, brought out his pistol, aimed, and fired. Tsubaki shouted a warning to the president, which caused Sona to turn. The shot hit her and she collapsed, unconscious. Issei approached with a knife as if to finish her, but Yura begged him not to, pleading that they surrendered. Issei chose not to kill Sona. He told Yura he would spare her on the condition they speak privately, then rendered Tsubaki unconscious. A few minutes later, Issei stood serious while Yura gathered her fallen companions. Yura expressed hope that the situation would be resolved soon, and Issei thanked her for being one of the few who believed him. Yura said she would do everything possible to get the evidence to the leaders. Issei said he hoped they would regret their mistake but that he had to leave. Yura wished him well and, in a brief, emotional gesture, pressed a quick, affectionate kiss to his cheek before activating a magic circle that transported the Citri clan to their family hospital. In seconds the protective barrier fell and returned to normal. Issei used a magic circle to change from his battle attire into a sailor uniform and checked his phone. It was 22. He hurried toward the Maersk vessel, worried he would be left behind. At the ship entrance he handed a stamp to the guard on duty. The guard inspected it and allowed him to board. Issei made his way up to the ship's upper deck. At 22:30 the ship set sail and Issei looked back at his country one last time, silently saying goodbye to Japan and hoping he might return someday, even if no one welcomed him. In a hospital room, most members of the Sitri clan lay unconscious on stretchers. Only Yura stood, worriedly watching her companions. She called Leviathan's leader to report that her sister was at the Sitri family hospital. The leader reacted immediately and arrived within minutes. Serafal demanded to know what had happened to her sister, and Yura grew nervous. Yura explained that they had found Issei at the Tokyo port. Serafal asked for details. Yura recounted that they had tracked him to Tokyo because, the day before, there had been a demon battle at an inn and the demon's auras had vanished. They concluded Issei had defeated them and had not left Japan, fleeing by land. The Sitri split up and searched different cities with ports and airports. Yura continued that Momo had located Issei entering the Tokyo port and called the group to gather. The president of the Sitri clan devised an attack plan in case he refused to come peacefully. When Issei approached the pier, the Sitri activated a pocket dimension and confronted him. The president asked him to come with them, but he refused and ordered them to attack. He defended himself and, taking advantage of a momentary lapse, used bombs to escape into the chaos. The president was struck by a blast and fell into the sea but recovered quickly and ordered the group to spread out and search the port. While they were separated, Issei defeated them in different locations. Serafal considered how Issei could best them so decisively, since he was not a demon and likely lacked the booster gear. Yura added that after he incapacitated Tsubaki by striking her arm, Sona launched a powerful counterattack that temporarily overwhelmed him. Yura explained sadly that the president had lost control and begun attacking Issei. During the chaos, a gunshot rang out and the president collapsed. The leader's expression shifted from surprise to cold anger. Yura went on, troubled, and said that when the president was on the ground, Issei had drawn a knife and seemed about to deliver a final strike. Yura had intervened, begging him to stop and offering their surrender. Issei spared them and handed Yura a small sphere intended for the leaders. After that they had come here. The Leviathan leader raged, demanding how he could do that to her little sister. Serafal swore that when she found him she would make him pay. At that moment Sona began to stir. Sona awakened groggy and briefly asked where she was, then remembered everything. She roared in fury, demanding where the man had gone. Yura, clearly nervous, explained that he had escaped and had nearly killed the president, and that she had begged for mercy to prevent further harm. Sona, frustrated, said that she had him and the others cornered. Yura reported that everyone else was present but that Tsubaki was the most seriously injured. She had been struck in the arm with a consecrated weapon and remained unconscious within 4 and a bandaged arm. Sona vowed to devise a better strategy next time to stop him and to claim her place among the faction pillars. Serafal, relieved that Sona was awake, said she would take the sphere to the other leaders and presented the object Yura had given her. Sona exchanged a brief farewell with her sister, and Yura bowed her goodbyes to the Leviathan leader. The Leviathan leader activated a magic circle and departed for the Gremory mansion. At Surzek's Gremory's office, Serafal appeared through a magic circle, looking worried. Lucifer sat at a desk reviewing papers. Surzek noticed Serafal's arrival and asked what was wrong. Serafal explained that her sister had found Issei but had been defeated, and she showed the sphere the Sitri had sent. Surzek decided to call an emergency meeting for the next day. In a distant chamber, a figure sat on a throne. Ryzavim entered and bowed, reporting new developments. He said the Red Dragon Emperor had been expelled from the factions and was now being hunted, the Sitri had been released, and a resurrection plan was underway. He added that they intended to reveal certain truths to the supernatural beings and enjoy the outcome. The throne's occupant thanked Ryzavim and expressed confidence that soon the factions would fall and that he would rise to dominance. The next day in the Gremory meeting hall, the Alliance leaders and the DXD group assembled, with the exception of the Gremory sisters, Kuroka, and Lufei. The patriarchs Gremory and Grafio were also present. Sona and Saji wore head bandages. Tsubaki had her arm bandaged and sat beside her furious partner Yudo Kiba. Lucifer opened the emergency meeting by explaining that they had called everyone because of developments concerning Issei. The Leviathan leader asked Sona to report. Sona projected the sphere's contents, displaying the Citri clan's recorded memories of their confrontation with Issei at Tokyo port. The recording showed the battle from the Citri perspective. Reactions among the leaders varied. Some were surprised, others angry, and a few looked sorrowful. Many were taken aback by the intimidating combat suit Issei had used and by the fact that he had bested one of the underworld's most strategic clans using only human weapons. It was a severe blow to Citri pride, appearing to many as a defeat by an ordinary human. Sona seethed with thoughts of revenge and resolved not to rest until she found him. The leaders then voiced their positions. Beelzebub concluded from the evidence that Issei was human. Odin agreed and added that he no longer seemed to be the Red Dragon Emperor. Lucifer suggested they leave him alone. Michael and Azazel felt he lacked the strength to threaten them. Metatron warned that he remained dangerous and could seek revenge. Asmodeus insisted that he had been willing to kill the Citri clan and therefore posed a threat that needed to be eliminated. The Leviathan leader declared she would personally hunt him down. Penemu and Gabriel offered their support. A seraph considered confirming whether he really was a traitor. Shiva reminded everyone that an offer of reward still stood. Vale and others nodded in agreement. Some leaders voiced more personal motivations. Serorg wanted a decisive confrontation, Dulio fantasized about capturing him for gluttonous reasons, and Griselda also aimed to capture him. The Leviathan leader then said that Yura had given her a sphere that Issei had handed over after his victory. She activated it and projected a recording. The hall fell silent as the image played. In the recording, Issei appeared in his combat suit and then removed a gas mask to reveal his face. He addressed the leaders with a mocking tone, acknowledging that his message would reach them because they had gathered. He spoke defiantly and taunted the traitorous leaders, his voice steady and unrepentant. Issei appeared on the projection and insisted that he was not the one who carried out the attacks. He had provided evidence, but they had branded him a terrorist, and he complained that they were stubborn and nothing could be done. He said he would not press the issue further. He explained that he had learned everything from his former teammates. A bounty had been placed on his head and, as part of settling an old favor, someone had been delivered to the factions. He laughed, mocking how naive they had been. He warned that if they attacked him again he would not hesitate to eliminate each of them, that they would fall one by one, and that he would make an exception for a select few. Issei then stated that he would not kill everyone. He would let them live, but there would be no second chance. He displayed a cube and asserted that it was the most powerful weapon to exist, that the gift he had given before represented only 5% of its power. He warned them that if they wanted to live they should leave him alone and concentrate on more pressing matters, because they were vulnerable to attacks from another enemy and he had already faced one of them. He said that if they believed him, fine. If not, they would perish at the hands of that other enemy and he would not come to their aid. Finally, Issei put on a gas mask and declared that if they declared war on him he would not hesitate to use the weapon. He told them to understand the message because there would be no second time, then ended the transmission. Everyone in the hall was stunned. The message had been clear, and he had threatened them if they continued their pursuit. Asmodeus reacted with furious resolve that Issei had to be stopped as soon as possible. Shemhazai insisted that Issei was the greatest threat they had ever faced, even more dangerous than Trihexa. Metatron demanded that they hurry to capture and eliminate him. Yasaka felt sorrow at seeing the projection and Issei's eyes. Although she knew the truth, she was helpless to intervene. Yura felt worried and considered abandoning the supernatural world when she realized the leaders would not let the matter rest. Zeus observed that Issei seemed completely unhinged. Shiva countered that Issei would not harm anyone unless attacked. At that moment McGregor burst into the meeting room, agitated, and urgently asked Surzex, the faction leaders, and the DXD group to view a transmission he had prepared. A stream of media broadcasts began to fill the room and everyone watched in shock. The footage showed NTMT moments between the Gremory girls and their former suitors, scenes that suggested they had moved on from Issei. The recordings included emotional promises exchanged in private and a moment in which Rias had offered a prominent role to Lewis. Several of her friends had made similar offers to their former suitors, and those offers had been accepted. The transmission made clear that the Citri clan, Yuto, and Gasper had been aware of these events. Subsequent clips showed Issei confronting many of them and then running off to an unknown location. When the set of recordings ended, a spokesperson appeared and addressed the factions. The speaker claimed that this was the evidence of what the faction leaders had been hiding, the reason the Red Dragon Emperor had been labeled a traitor. He argued that the Emperor had been betrayed by his promised partners and friends, abandoned and forgotten, and that the leaders had expected everyone to accept the lie that the Emperor was a traitor without question. The speaker accused the leaders of being the true traitors, governing only for themselves, and urged everyone not to be fooled. He called for people to demand explanations and, if the leaders did not provide them, to remove those in power. He closed by exhorting everyone to go out and express their discontent, then cut the broadcast. Those in the room reacted strongly. Yuto clenched his fists with anger as he remembered supporting the betrayal and the role he had played. Gasper felt miserable because, while he had not supported the plan, he had hidden the girl's actions from Issei. Sona and Tsubaki lowered their heads in shame. Other members of their clan were stunned. Yura glared at her clan leaders in fury. Many others who had been unaware of the situation felt immediate remorse for what they had permitted to happen at the port. Yasaka, Lazel, Valley, Biko, and Arthur turned angry eyes toward the Citri clan, Kiba, and Gasper for concealing the truth. Anxiety spread through the hall at the thought that the revelation could spark large-scale protests or even civil unrest. The leaders themselves were stunned. They had known about the girls' betrayals to some extent, but not that they would go so far as to bring back their former suitors as new pawns. Michael and Surzex felt ashamed, but they were somewhat relieved that they had already told the girls to leave and hide. In an unknown location, three figures met and laughed together at the success of their plan. Rizavim laughed with manic delight, and the two hooded figures confirmed that everything had gone according to plan and that the leaders now had their days numbered. The three of them laughed together, confident in the chaos they had sown. After the broadcast, a heavy silence settled over the factions. Although many had known that the girls had been unfaithful to Issei, few had realized they would go so far as to bring back their former suitors. Michael, Azazel, and Surzex put the pieces together and realized that Issei had been investigating who would become Rias's new pawns. They concluded that he had not been the traitor. Yasaka grew serious because Issei had confided everything to her who those men were and the betrayal she feared was coming, and she finally understood the full meaning of his warnings. He knew he was innocent and had proven it, but no one believed him. The leaders Gabriel, Shiva, Odin, and Zeus were left uncertain, still troubled by what had been shown in the video. Baraquiel was primarily worried about his daughter Aquino. He might be angry at what she had done, but he had no place to question her. This was their problem, and the thought of her being declared a criminal terrified him. Rias's parents, Zeoticus and Venelana, were disappointed by their daughter's decision to betray her fiancé, but they had no right to interfere. The brown-haired man was technically their pawn, and the demon laws allowed her to act as she wished. Although the engagement remained formally valid, the betrayal had nullified it, and they feared their daughter's name would be stained. The other leaders were anxious as well, since members of each faction could rise up and demand the removal of those in power. Within the DXD group, the reaction was similar. Most were shocked by the revelations accusing the brown-haired man of betrayal, but they chose to remain silent because it was a clan matter to be resolved internally. Sona felt deep concern, not only about possible sanctions for being complicit but also about what might be decided for her best friend. Tsubaki worried about both her boyfriend and her queen, knowing that both clans might lose prestige because of these events. Both Gremory youths were troubled. Gasper appeared serious, no longer dressed as a woman but wearing blue athletic clothing, and he hoped the accused would be left alone, convinced he was not guilty and that the real traitors were the women who acted against him. Kiba felt guilt and sorrow. He had obeyed orders and failed to help Issei when help was needed most, and he feared he had lost the title of friend through his silence. Both Citri leaders were grim. Tsubaki noted with resignation that everything had come to light and consequences would follow. Sona worried that being labeled complicit would prevent her from achieving her goals, ruin her honor, and lead to her removal from DXD. Minutes later, a group of soldiers burst into the hall, frantic. A soldier reported that they were being invaded. The leaders reacted with disbelief and alarm. Everyone left the Gremory mansion and went outside. In the courtyard, the leaders and the assembled guests looked up in shock as supernatural beings descended from the sky and poured in across the grounds. Creatures of many races, demons, vampires, and others surged forward, angry and loud. They demanded the removal of the leaders, their voices rising together in fury. The leaders felt the pressure of the crowd and the weight of the revelations they had followed. Demons accused Lucifer and referenced the accused dragon, declaring him a traitor. Angels blamed Michael and his ace for all that had happened. Fallen angels called Baraquil a traitor and asserted that his daughter had condemned the Red Dragon Emperor. Other factions blamed Azazel for failing to watch over them and demanded his removal. Shemhazai, Metatron, and Falbium summoned loudspeakers and had them distributed across the grounds. The three spoke and proposed an idea meant to satisfy the assembled supernatural masses. They consulted with the other leaders, excluding those accused, and most agreed with the plan. Asmodeus then stepped forward and had a camera brought into place to focus on the leaders. The protest was being broadcast to all factions. Asmodeus addressed the alliance with a prepared statement. The crowd responded with boos and hissing, making it clear that tensions were high and hostility filled the air. They went straight to the point. The revelation moments ago caught everyone off guard. They knew of the girl's betrayal but not that they would turn against the Red Dragon Emperor. Asmodeus spoke seriously, flanked by Metatron and Shemhazai. Asmodeus announced that a decision had just been made and expressed hope that the assembly would accept it. He declared that the Gremory and Citri clans would be removed from the DXD security group until the incident was resolved. The members of DXD reacted with shock. Asmodeus requested that Lucifer, the Archangel Michael, and Cadre Azazel step down from the Alliance leadership table until the matter was clarified. He delivered the request with a solemn seriousness that nevertheless produced cheers among many supernatural beings. Asmodeus added that the women of the Gremory clan, for provoking the betrayal of the former pillar of the factions, would be designated as renegade demons. The announcement was delivered with anger, and everyone reacted with surprise. Asmodeus declared that details and rewards for their capture would be published soon. Surzex reacted angrily, protesting the decision. Venelana responded sadly that there was nothing they could do, grieving for her daughter. Zeoticus spoke in sorrow that all they could do was hope the nightmare would end. Graphia consoled her husband gently and urged him not to make a scene. Asmodeus explained that the measures were temporary until the truth was proven otherwise and reiterated the request for Surzex, Lucifer, and Michael to resign from the alliance table due to conflicts of interest. He concluded the address by reiterating that data and bounties on the traitors would be published shortly. The supernatural beings celebrated the resolution, believing the leaders had acted correctly under pressure. The Citri clan stood stunned and incredulous at being removed from DXD, and Sona felt sorrow that her best friend had been declared a renegade demon. Kiba and Gasper were dismayed that their mistress and friends were now labeled criminals. They simply wished none of this had happened. A short time later, Surzex, Lucifer, Michael, and Azazel formally resigned from the Alliance leadership table. This change did not affect their current positions. It only prevented them from participating in Alliance meetings and decisions. The resignations were broadcast to all factions, and the identities of the new renegade demons, the Gremory girls, were published. Profile: Rias Gremory. Name: Rias Gremory. Age: 19. Residence: Kuo, Japan. Species: Demon. Criminal rank: Cissus+. Comments: responsible for the betrayal of the faction's hero. Profile: Akino Himejima, Rias's queen. Name: Akino Himejima. Age: 19. Residence: Kuo, Japan. Species: Demon, Fallen Angel. Criminal rank: Cissus+. Comments: accomplice to Rias Gremory in the betrayal of the faction's hero. Profile: Asia Argento, Rias's bishop. Name: Asia Argento. Age: 18. Residence: Kuo, Japan. Species: Demon, former human. Criminal rank: Cissus+. Comments: accomplice to Rias Gremory in the betrayal of the faction's hero. Profile: Kaneko Tuju, Rias's rook. Name: Kiniko Tujushiron. Age, 17. Residence, Kuo, Japan. Species, demon. Criminal rank, SS+. Comments, accomplice to Rias Gremery in the betrayal of the faction's hero. Profile, Zenobia Corda, Rias's knight. Name, Zenobia Corda. Age, 18. Residence, Kuo, Japan. Species, demon, former human. Criminal rank, SS+. Comments, accomplice to Rias Gremery in the betrayal of the faction's hero. Profile, Rosweiss, Rias's Valkyrie Rook. Name, Rosweiss. Age, 25. Residence, Kuo, Japan. Species, demon. Criminal rank, SS+. Comments, accomplice to Rias Gremery in the betrayal of the faction's hero. Profile, Irina Shidu, Michael's ace. Name, Irina Shidu. Age, 18. Residence, Kuo, Japan. Species, angel, former human. Criminal rank, SS+. Comments, accomplice to Rias Gremery in the betrayal of the faction's hero. Profile, Ravel Phoenix, daughter of the Phoenix Patriarchs. Name, Ravel Phoenix. Age, 17. Residence, Kuo, Japan. Species, demon. Criminal rank, SS+. Comments, accomplice to Rias Gremery in the betrayal of the faction's hero. The reward schedule was presented in a table, with individual prices and a different total value if captured together. Reward pool. Rias Gremery. Monetary reward and promotion to upper class. Asia Argento. Monetary reward. Aquino Himejima. Monetary reward and promotion to middle class. Kiniko Tuju. Monetary reward. Zenobia Corda. Monetary reward and the Sword X Durandal. Rosweiss. Monetary reward and promotion to middle class. Irina Shidu. Monetary reward and reinstatement as a reincarnated angel. Ravel Phoenix. Monetary reward and 1 year of Phoenix Tears. Provided free. Church Trio. Monetary reward, promotion to upper class, free access to heaven, and acquisition of holy swords. Rias and Aquino together. Monetary reward, jewels, a plot in the underworld, and promotion to upper class. Ravel and Kiniko together. Promotion to upper class and monetary reward. All together. Promotion to supreme class, unrestricted access to every faction, territory in the underworld, and a monetary reward. All this information was distributed to the factions belonging to the Alliance. Somewhere in the human world, a group of the girls were listening to the broadcast. When the transmission cut, they reacted with shock. Rias admitted with sadness that her brother had been right and that her plan had been exposed, and that because of her she had condemned them all. Aquino acknowledged the consequences of their actions and lamented that time could not be turned back. Ravel observed sternly that, although the reward for catching them was lower than the one for Issei, they must avoid attracting attention. Irina emphasized the need for caution to avoid capture. Kuroka said playfully that she wanted to find Issei and give him a hug. One of the girls then asked Kuroka where she had gotten the radio. The redhead asked a question, and Kuroka responded seriously that the radio belonged to Issei. She had taken it from his house and discovered he had been spying on the factions. Lu Fei replied that she could hardly believe Issei would do such a thing, but that the information would help them understand the factions' plans. Asia commented that Issei was surprising. Rosweiss said with pride that no one would have expected a hopeless pervert to turn out to be a genius. Zenobia admitted she only hoped he was all right, wherever he was. The girls resolved together that they would find Issei. At an unknown location, a being sat on a throne watching the transmission and laughed in a distorted, manic voice. The being declared that the leaders had separated, the alliance was fragile, and it was only a matter of time before everything ended. It added that it would soon gather its troops and the others would fall. A ship was approaching the port of San Antonio at night. The brown-haired man looked out at the distant city lights and began to prepare to disembark. He took a towel from his locker and went to the ship's bathroom to freshen up. He remembered the time on deck when he had been searching for the container sent from Japan. He checked several cargo sections: chemicals, vehicles, refrigerated containers until he found the ordinary container labeled FCIU 218093. He used bolt cutters to break the seal, opened the door, and inspected the contents with relief. Inside were many boxes and cases. Most of the shipment consisted of weapons and ammunition. He took a barbell, dumbbells, and several weight plates and began assembling equipment. After getting permission from the ship's captain to set up, he put together a small gym, a treadmill, a pulley machine, a leg extension machine, a barbell with weights, and 2 dumbbells. For 2 weeks he spent most of his days training on the ship and then returned to the container to continue his work while trying to avoid detection. He thought he could not afford to regret his choices. This was a journey with no turning back. After freshening up, he dried off and changed into casual clothes, blue dress pants, a black shirt with a white star on the chest, black sneakers, and a black hooded sweatshirt. He went down to the lower deck to wait for permission to disembark. When the ship docked at San Antonio, a gangway was set up and personnel began to leave. He stepped onto the pier and saw that the place looked similar to the port in Tokyo. He donned a safety helmet and walked along the dock among rows of containers, cranes, and trucks. At the port entrance he completed the exit check and walked into the city. He made his way toward the main avenue but quickly realized he was lost because the signage and information were all in Spanish. He knew only Japanese and English, having lost his previous ability to perceive other languages. He activated roaming on his phone, adjusted the time to 2200 hours, and opened GPS. The map showed Valparaiso more than 90 kilometers to the north. The only practical way to get there was by bus. He decided to find the bus terminal. He found the terminal's address and headed that way. While looking at his phone, a man slipped up from behind and snatched it, then ran off at high speed. He chased after the thief, determined to recover his phone. The thief sprinted rapidly, but the brown-haired man steadily closed the distance. The thief cut toward a nearby promenade where his gang waited. As they neared the promenade, he pushed forward, caught up to the thief, and brought him down. A brief scuffle followed. The thief dropped the phone. He struck the thief in a controlled move that put him out of the fight, and the phone skidded across the pavement. When he reached for it, a gunshot rang out. He dove to the ground as a bullet zipped past dangerously close to his face. 4 men with pistols approached, and he felt a surge of concern. The gang leader threatened to beat him up. He said he did not understand what they were saying. The men laughed and mocked him as a foreigner. The thugs taunted Issei, and Issei understood they wanted to kill him. While they were distracted, Issei quietly produced a revolver and kept it hidden. The gang leader demanded that Issei hand over everything. There were people nearby recording the confrontation instead of calling the police. Issei said nothing. He waited until the leader came close to check his pockets. A single shot rang out. Issei had fired, hitting the leader and knocking him off balance. Before the leader could fall, Issei grabbed him and used his body as cover as the other 3 thugs opened fire. Their shots struck the leader as he went down. Taking advantage of the confusion, Issei fired at the 3 remaining men, hitting them and bringing them down. Issei felt a surge of panic. He thought that he had committed a serious crime and that if he were caught he would end up in prison. Issei pushed the leader's body aside, grabbed the leader's phone, and saw that a police cruiser was approaching. Without hesitation he sprinted toward the city center, passing through the main square and trying to lose the pursuing patrol. Issei worried that if the chase continued he would be caught. He darted into a street going the wrong way to throw off the police. The patrol activated its siren and followed, and Issei began to tire. The officers fired at him in an attempt to stop him, but their shots failed to bring him down. Issei realized he was being shot at and felt the danger keenly. He fired a shot that punctured the front tire of the patrol car, causing the officers to lose control and crash into a light pole. The officers called for backup before abandoning the vehicle to pursue Issei on foot. He found a second wind and ran faster, slipping between houses near the hillside until he lost sight of them. Issei then cast a spell to alter his appearance to avoid capture. Issei's new appearance was blonde hair, light-colored clothing, and glasses. He decided he needed to rest and returned to the main square to sit on a bench. A short while later, using his phone, he had taught himself some basic phrases to navigate while he was in the area and to find his way to Valparaiso. He remembered something important: his motorcycle. He was shocked by what he had done. He thought that he had made a terrible mistake and harmed many people. Passing strangers spoke about the shooting. They said that someone had taken down a gang known as the Harbor Thieves and that the police were searching everywhere for the person responsible. Issei rose and slipped away to a place where he would not be seen. He reached the back of a shopping center where no one was around, opened a dimensional space, and pulled out his motorcycle. He started the engine, pushed the bike out to the street, mounted, and accelerated down the avenue. He checked his map on the phone and determined that if he kept going straight he would reach Valparaiso. He set his course and continued the trip. About an hour later, Issei noticed the motorcycle was running low on fuel. He thought he had to find a gas station before he ran out. After a short ride, he found one and pulled in. At the self-service pumps he shut off the motorcycle and took out his wallet. He used the white card he had used before to hack the pump mechanism. After a moment the pump accepted the card, he entered the amount, and the payment went through. Issei hoped he would not be discovered as he began filling the motorcycle's tank. When the tank was full, he returned the nozzle to its holder and moved the bike to a parking spot. He went into the convenience store to buy something to eat. Inside he picked up a drink, 2 packets of cookies, and a bag of chips. He went to the cashier, paid for the items, and left the store with his purchases. He left the establishment, went to his motorcycle, mounted it, started it, and rode away. On the road, he thought that they had not caught him, although it had been easier than in Japan. He decided to look for a place to eat and found some benches. He parked, turned off the bike, removed his helmet, and sat down to eat. The food tasted good. He had been very hungry after what had happened with those men. He still had the spell active and worried that the recordings of those people might reveal he was a foreigner and that he was wanted in Japan. He reminded himself that he must not be captured under any circumstances, recalling what he had learned about prisons around the world. He turned to look at the sea, taking in the night view, and a painful memory came back. In the memory he stood at the water's edge with Rias beneath a starry sky. He took her hands and confessed his love, tears in his eyes. Rias returned his feelings and promised to love him always. Aquino teased them with a smile. Asia pouted gently. Zenobia remained serious. Irina spoke with heartfelt earnestness. Kaneko showed a small, happy smile. Rosweiss expressed warm support. Ravel looked genuinely moved. He looked at the girls and felt like the luckiest man alive to have people who loved him unconditionally. Overcome with emotion, he told each of them how much they meant to him and thanked them for helping him heal from his past wounds. They each replied with declarations of devotion and support. Zenobia admitted that she had been pragmatic at first but that he had taught her what love was. Rosweiss said she had been hesitant in the past but had come to accept and care for him deeply. They all shared a heartfelt embrace, comforted by the moment. Back in the present, he began to cry. He wondered why everything had gone wrong, how much he missed them, and how painful it was to be on the opposite side now. He felt stained by violence and saw himself as a failure, convinced he did not deserve them and was running away like a coward. He poured out his anguish for several minutes, then slowly calmed and continued his journey toward Valparaiso. Some time later, 8 men arrived at the spot where he had been. They confirmed he had been there and believed he was traveling toward Valparaiso. They planned to wait for him there, thinking of the reward, and discussed making a plan. A magic circle then appeared and they departed. Valparaiso, Chile. At 2:30 a.m., under the cover of darkness, he rode his motorcycle toward the city along a quiet road near Placilla, an area of many hills. He parked at the roadside to search for a place to sleep after the long trip. He pulled out his phone and looked for hotels, motels, or inns, but after a long search found nothing available and grew concerned, since the sites were in Spanish and he did not fully understand the language. After some time he found the website of a 5-star hotel that offered an English option. He accessed the English version and found availability. The address was 12 kilometers north, in the city of Vina del Marche. He had found something and would go immediately. It was cold, so he started his motorcycle. A short time later, in Vina del Mar, Chile, he passed the flower clock and headed toward the city center, guided by his phone to the hotel. He rode along the main avenue, turned onto another street, and saw a square. The hotel stood on the corner and his phone indicated he was only a few meters away. He stopped outside, noticed there were no people or vehicles around, killed the engine, removed his helmet, and opened a pocket dimension to store the motorcycle and helmet. After checking that no one had seen him, he entered the hotel. Inside the five-star hotel, he looked for the reception desk and approached a receptionist. The receptionist asked if he had a room reservation. He explained that he did not speak Spanish and that he spoke English. The receptionist apologized and continued the check-in in English. She confirmed that a reservation had been made a short time earlier. When she asked for the name on the reservation, he gave the name Steve Grossman. The receptionist found the record and confirmed that Mr. Grossman had booked a stay starting 20 minutes earlier for 1 night and 1 day. He paid with a white credit card he had altered with magic to appear as a legitimate bank card. The receptionist assigned room 305 and asked the bellboy to guide the guest to his room. The bellboy politely offered to carry his backpack and the guest accepted. They took the elevator to the 3rd floor, and the bellboy led him to room. The bellboy opened the door, placed the backpack on a sofa in the bedroom, and thanked him for choosing the hotel. Steve handed the bellboy a bill, and the bellboy left wishing him a good rest. Steve examined the comfortable room: a large bed, a refrigerator, a satellite television, a sofa, a table, and a bathroom. He muttered that he finally had a rest after a crazy day, removed his clothes, and took a shower. A short time later, feeling relaxed, he lay down and fell asleep almost instantly. At midday he woke, stretched, showered again, and brushed his teeth. After getting dressed he went to the hotel dining room. Seated at a table, he ate a slice of 3 chocolate cake and drank a cup of coffee with milk. He reminded himself that he had to be at the port of Valparaiso by 21:30 and that he needed to keep his altered appearance to avoid being caught. He decided to spend the day exploring the city and perhaps have lunch outside. He visited places like Playa del Sol, Renaca, and Las Salinas Beach, wandered through the city center and several shopping malls, attended a training session of the Everton Divina del Mar football club at Estadio Sausalito, and finished by watching some races at Valparaiso Sporting. At 1900 hours he returned to the hotel to shower and gather his things for the trip to Valparaiso. He handed the room key to the receptionist and left. Night had fallen over Vina del Mar as he walked to a nearby metro station, purchased a travel card with credit, validated it at the turnstile, and descended to the platform. He waited for the train that would take him to the port. The line indicated it would stop at the front of the port. When the train arrived he boarded and reflected on his day. He noted that people here were passionate about football and horse racing and that their customs differed from his. The food had been delicious, especially the fried fish, and he had enjoyed a beef stew. He hoped to return someday because he liked the place. While on the train he felt the attention of 4 men watching him closely. He sensed their energy and identified it as sacred, a signature of the church. Realizing they had found him, he decided he would have to evade them. He did not want to attract attention, and they must know there was a reward. The train stopped at a station near a bridge and a pier. The brown-haired man seized the chance to get off when he saw where the port was and disembarked early to slip away from the pursuers. He ran along the platform, hurriedly leaving the station. The men who had followed him also left the train but called in reinforcements. In downtown Valparaiso, the atmosphere shifted as he crossed the street and he realized he had stepped into a pocket dimension. The sky had turned pale while the street below seemed darker. He kept running toward the city center when a sudden bolt of holy lightning struck from above. He raised a magic shield to protect himself. He scanned the area for the attackers and found 8 figures closing in. One of the men identified him as Steve Grossman, also known as Issei, the most wanted criminal among the factions. The brown-haired man dispelled his disguise and returned his hair to its natural brown. Ramiro Gatica stepped forward and introduced himself as an exorcist from the Chilean church. He was a little older than Issei, with black hair, brown eyes, and he wore a church battlesuit. Francisca Huerta then identified herself as another exorcist. She was the same age as Ramiro, with brown hair highlighted blonde and green eyes, wearing a battle outfit similar to those used by Zenobia and Irina. Pedro Abarca named himself as an exorcist. He was the same age as Issei, with black hair and blue eyes, dressed in priestly robes. Camila Gonzalez stated she was an exorcist, roughly Kaniko's age, taller than the younger Nicomeda, with blonde hair, green eyes, and the church battle armor. Gonzalo Zarate presented himself as an exorcist and adult member of the team, with brown hair and brown eyes in priestly attire. Sebastian Vilches identified himself as a priest, an older man with black hair streaked with gray and brown eyes, in clerical robes. Juan Carlos Ponce announced he was an exorcist, around Issei's age, with blonde hair and brown eyes in a battle suit. Finally, Isidora Undaraga introduced herself as the team leader, an adult exorcist with red hair and blue eyes wearing an exorcist uniform. The brown-haired man jeeringly remarked that the reward would go to only one person, which visibly angered the group. Isidora demanded his surrender, warning that they did not want to fight, and ordered him to turn himself in for trial in San Antonio before being taken for the bounty. He refused, summoning a black battle suit with a gas mask. Isidora ordered the attack and the team moved as one to surround him. The women drew swords while the men began to charge holy lightning attacks and launched them. He sheltered behind his magical barrier as the blades struck it, but the shield held. Ramiro drew a pistol and fired a holy round. The brown-haired man leaped aside and at that moment lowered his magic shield, allowing the other men to unleash another volley of lightning. The shield flared and he was propelled away, skidding into the Valparaiso bus terminal before landing on his feet. Francisco was waiting and knocked him out of the terminal with a powerful punch that sent him outside and down near a building. His bulletproof vest absorbed most of the impact and he stood up as the team closed in around him again. Sebastian warned that they knew he was human and urged him not to resist to avoid death. Gonzalo appealed to him to do the right thing for others. Issei assessed their capabilities internally. They were far weaker than the Citri clan, slower than Kiba and the girls, and while he could likely overcome them individually, their coordination made them dangerous. Camila and Juan Carlos urged him to surrender. Issei resolved to use the same tactic he had used against the Citri clan. He noticed a building nearby and feigned surrender, stipulating in exchange that he would not be taken to the police but handed over to the factions. While distracting them, he produced 2 grenades and an electroshock device. Isidora and Ramiro reacted with visible anger. With a shout, he pulled a pin and tossed the first grenade. Ramiro shot the grenade in midair, triggering a blinding flash that forced everyone to cover their eyes. The second device burst into a fine white powder that filled the air. He activated the electroshock tool, producing small arcs of electricity into the atmosphere that caused the church members to collapse, immobilized and writhing in pain as they fell. He moved in and deployed a pair of pistols loaded with non-lethal stun rounds. He fired at each member, ensuring they were completely incapacitated without lasting harm. Isidora cried out in fury at her inability to move. He explained that he had only rendered them still to guarantee his safety. Camila and Francisco warned that reinforcements would arrive and that he would be finished when they did. Issei, furious, ordered them to be silent. He then moved through the stunned group and used quick, precise strikes to render the remaining members unconscious. With the immediate threat neutralized, he carried each body to an entrance of a nearby building that turned out to be the Chilean National Congress. The brown-haired man stacked the fallen one on top of another and then used healing magic on them, restoring some of their wounds. When he finished, he found a pole and a Chilean flag, wrote something on the fabric, and fixed it to the pole. Using the legs of some of the fallen to steady it, he cast a spell that rendered them invisible while allowing a faint magic to leak from them. He thought that would be enough, checked the time, and became frightened. He realized it was 9 p.m. and he did not have time. He needed to arrive quickly. He changed into a sailor's uniform in haste, and as a dimensional rift opened, he slipped out across the rooftops of the downtown commercial buildings, moving without being noticed. At the port of Valparaiso, he arrived quickly, validated his entry, put on a helmet, and went to the pier to find the ship that would take him north. The brown-haired man noted that the vessel was a Hapag-Lloyd. He found the ship, presented his pass at the entrance, and boarded just in time. At 9:30 p.m. the Hapag-Lloyd ship departed the port of Valparaiso heading north. Outside the National Congress of Chile, 3 magical circles appeared and revealed 3 women. One had black hair and pigtails and wore battle armor, The second was blonde in battle gear, and the third had violet hair and similarly striking combat attire. They sensed a familiar magic emission and prepared to strike, but saw no one present. The energy continued to leak, and they realized an invisibility spell had been cast. They broke the spell and revealed 8 fallen members of the Chilean church. When they saw the flag the fallen clutched with their legs, all 3 women became furious at the message written on it. The black-haired woman vowed that he would pay for this. The violet-haired woman promised that when she caught him he would regret it. The blonde woman expressed concern and hoped the others would be well when the time came. They activated a magical circle and transported the 8 fallen away.